So we should be live now. How's it going, Gary?
Doing well. Hi, guys.
so, uh, so this is our first attempt at doing a call-in show here um, with a guest that is not myself or Dan. So I appreciate you coming on and taking the plunge into doing that.
Well, sure. It sounded like fun first time I heard it, and uh, so I'm thrilled to be here to do it. Of course.
So for those who are just jumping on now, so the way the call-in show works is there's a link, and I'll also put it in chat, but there's a link that will be in the description and is also on the screen right now. And if you click that link, you'll come into a waiting room, basically, and it'll be letting us know, as long as your camera is on, that you're ready to come on the show. And so there may be usually there are a few people waiting in line. So you may not get on immediately, but you'll be sort of put in a line with a few other people. And then we're going to bring people on one at a time. Usually it takes them a minute, Gary, to get in line and decide if they want to do it and what question they might want to ask and to turn their camera on. But I'm sure we will have people.
Sure.
And they'll get a chance to sort of meet you, at least over the computer like this, and talk to you and get to know you a little bit, maybe ask you a question or two, and just sort of go from there. So as people decide whether or not they want to be brave, and I hope they will, and jump on with us, we're having some people in the chat saying that they're ready and want to do it.
Good.
I guess just maybe we can just start by, I'm interested in sort of, where your head is at these days, like how things have been going for you, generally in the hobby. I know you've been traveling a lot, going to shows, very engaged in everything. How are you doing? How do you feel the hobby's doing? Those types of things as people kind of file in.
Yeah, well, let me first say that you might hear a lot of chirping in the background because we have parakeets, and so there's 5 parakeets in the cage behind me, so you might hear them chirping. So I don't want to make anybody nervous, and I don't want to distract anybody because of that. But, that if you hear that, that's what it is. It's birds chirping. So, yeah, as far as your question, at this point in my hobby life, I'm very, very fortunate that I can do what I do. And that is, I can go to all the shows I want to go to, and I have a very understanding wife, Autism Instruct. She totally supports me. She even enjoys the hobbies too. And she enjoys the help that it's done for our charity work, which is really big. And so, I understand that, being of retirement age, now I can do all these things, without a second thought. And so I'm fortunate that way. I go to the shows, I go to all the collecticons and international shows. Like I'll be going to Japan for Worlds. I'll be going to Paris in April, for the LA Gala TCG. And then I'll be going to all 7 collecticons. I kind of have to limit it there, though, because, even though I know I look 30, I'm not. At 68, it gets to be a little bit harder to do things. So I limit myself just to those. And that almost adds up to like one thing a month, which is still quite a bit. But again, I don't take that for granted. I'm fortunate in 2 ways. Not only that I can, afford to do that and I have the time, but I have, there's actually people that are interested in seeing me and talking to me and asking me questions and, just meeting me. I'm fortunate in those 2 ways that this is even a possibility. And again, I don't take that for granted. That's why 2 days last, I guess that was August, 2 days after running over my leg with my truck and being in the hospital and emergency. 2 days later, I was in Long Beach at Collecticon. It's because I take it really seriously, and I know people know I'm going to be there, and by hook or by crook, I'm going to make it. So for me, it's like the tail end of the hobby experience where I've pretty much accomplished my goals. I've worked hard my entire life, and so I'm able to afford it. And now I can do what I enjoy, and what I enjoy is what I'm doing now, and that is making it to conventions and all that.
It's like a Pokemon retirement.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Just look at yourself. If you were retired now and had the resources to do what you'd like, a lot of it would center around, what you enjoy. And, that's one good thing about retirement. For me, I don't get a big thrill out of sitting on a boat and cruising and that, but I get a huge thrill out of, going to watch Vanilla Ice perform and being able to see all my friends in this hobby and that's what I enjoy. And you'd do the same thing. I know you would. And so I'm sure everybody can identify, with the position that I'm in. And so what I'm doing isn't charity, as far as the hobbies are concerned. What I'm doing is what I enjoy doing. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of the conventions and hanging out with people in person. And
Yes.
like people in this group, like a bunch of us went to like a bunch of people from my Discord and people and like different Discords that are sort of like similar to mine. Like a bunch of us all vended at Denver.
Yes.
And I think it was a highlight for, so many of us, that experience. So I think that although it is expensive to go to conventions, sort of as you're saying, and most of us are sort of in the beginning or middle beginning of our careers, or more
Right.
towards the beginning, and so are not necessarily in particularly established financial positions, or just are very busy with sort of like our careers. So being sort of, going to everyone isn't really an option for most of us. It's definitely a luxury to be able to go to them. But I think that many of us, if we were retired or we were, at the tail end and had more free time, I'm sure would go to like tons of them and
Oh yeah.
them. So I think we would be doing, just as you said, a lot of what you were doing if we were at that sort of stage for ourselves. And
Right.
I think a lot of people are going to try. I mean, we're going to try to go to at least 3 or 4, maybe a year, and have those experiences. And we do try to vend and sell and make some money, or at least break even, or sort of recoup some costs of the trip.
Sure.
And I think that if I was totally retired and in a totally comfortable financial place, I probably wouldn't do that I'd probably only vend for half of them or something like that.
Right. Well, you guys had a great idea. You and Nick and the guys, renting that whole island, and then all of you participating together inside there. That was a terrific idea, because you had a whole bunch of friends, people that we all know and recognize. Mm-hmm. And yet you were able, hopefully, to take a few bucks out, and which makes it possible to make the trips. And it's kind of like what I always say. I think, like everybody knows, I don't charge for pictures or autographs or anything like that. But the whole wall of people, the voice actors, the influencers, they do charge. And what I try to explain to everybody is I don't charge because I don't need to. They are trying to make a living. They're just trying to get by and pay their bills. And so don't compare them to me. That's one of the reasons I stopped working the wall with all of them, was people would come to me, and again, I'd do anything for nothing. And then they would go to them. They say, well, Gary doesn't charge anything for that. And it kind of made me feel bad, you know, and I'm sure it probably made them feel bad too. And so that's why I told Collecticon, you know, I'm still going to come, but I'm going to roam free. I'm not going to be stuck at a table, or I'm not going to get stuck up on the wall of them because, you know, because it takes the enjoyment out of it for me. And now what I can do is I can walk the floor, or when I don't have a broken leg, I can walk the floor, and I can, you know, go to the vendors' booths, and I can sit with the vendors and talk to the people. And I'll tell you something, honest to goodness, Jake, in Denver, I signed more autographs and took more pictures than I ever did having a booth up against the wall with all the signers in that. And so and plus I would, at the check-in area before you go into the convention, I'm there every morning for a couple hours. So people, when they get their tickets, they can come right up to me and get whatever they want. And that way I'm not competing against those other people. And yet, honest to goodness, I signed more and took more pictures than I've ever done before, without having a stationary place to stay at. So it's worked out beautifully. And every Collecticon this year, all your people watching right now, they're going to see me at the front of the ticket line, being available to them for whatever they'd like. And they're going to see me the whole day inside the hall, you know, at different vendors, and, you know, just hanging out in that. And they can always come right up to me. And so that's how it's going to be from now on.
So are you ready, Gary, to bring on our first person? We have someone in line here.
Sure. Now I can't see your chat in that. So all I see is you and me. And then if you want to call in live, click this link. So I'm going to leave it up to you to.
You should be able to see comments on the side. Do you see comments on the right-hand side, or no?
No.
Okay, that's okay. I'll read everything off. You don't have to worry about it. So the first person we're bringing on goes by the name Fat Belly Gengar.
I'm going to show you.
I'm gonna bring him on right now. And you ready for him, Gary?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing.
No worries. I got it. Okay. All right. Hello there.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
How are you doing? Thanks for coming on the stream. Yes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Can you hear us?
This is honestly the first time I've ever been able to catch the live call-in show, so I was like, yeah, definitely.
Oh, cool.
I usually listen at work. I like the podcast at work. It's very enjoyable. It kind of makes my day go by quicker. So
I'm glad that it can be on in the background at work. I often listening to like other Pokemon podcasts when I'm working and doing other things at work. So I think a lot of us can relate to that.
I watch a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of podcasts too, but while my wife is yelling at me, at least I have something to listen to when she's yelling at me. So
put an earbud in, you just drown it out.
So did you have like any specific question or things you wanted to ask?
Well, I was kind of just listening to you guys' conversation about Collecticon and all that. I've honestly never been to one, but I have a kind of a little local show coming up. It's not necessarily cards, but it's called like Collectorabilia or something like that. That's the show. And I went to it last year. It's kind of cool. We got a bunch of different stuff, and there was honestly only one or two Pokemon little booths, and I felt like there was kids all around that and just kind of going crazy over it.
What state are you in?
I'm actually in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
Do you ever get out to any events near there, Gary?
For me, it's just like I don't really have, I don't really know anybody, and I don't really have enough money to kind of just blow on a weekend or two. So
right.
But maybe one day I'll go. I think it would be fun.
Yeah, and there's always a lot of podcasts, and there's a lot of videos that show the Collecticons and what's going on. I watch those all the time myself, even though I'm there at them.
Yeah, I guess, and another thing that I kind of would like to maybe discuss is, you know, I guess the state of, grading right now.
Hmm.
It seems like, PSA is just above everybody, and kind of everybody else is trying to fight for that those second place scraps. And do you guys think CGC will hold its run in the long run? Do you think the older, little like Beckett cases, are they are they making new cases, or are they kind of just talking about it? Do you think they're actually doing something, or
So
I don't
Gary,
know if that's
before
makes
you
any
jump in on
sense,
that
but
really good question, I just want to mention one thing to your earlier point about Collecticon, which
yeah.
in my personal opinion, like if you haven't really met people in person or engaged with people in person yet, you can do that at Collecticon. Like you can meet people for the first time, and like we invited, like I met 6, 7 people for the first time that like came out to dinner with me, came to the party afterwards and hung out. But there were other people who probably didn't know anyone, who maybe were a little bit shy, like didn't come up to me, didn't come up to other people that they wanted to hang out with, and might not have had like a worthwhile time to spend that much money. So one thing I would say is encouraging, like, to get the most out of it is definitely to like come to the dinner, like hang out after the con, because like the convention is fun, but a lot of us are going to be like selling and doing things. It's not going to be
So
like a lot of hanging out, but afterwards there's like a lot of hanging out,
Mhm.
these types of things. Now, the money part is huge. I mean, they're very expensive to go to because the hotels are very expensive, the flight is very expensive. So if you can't drive, to one close to you or reasonably close, it is a very expensive endeavor, particularly if you're not vending. And so if you aren't going to see close friends that you haven't already engaged with, I think I would be careful jumping into something like that unless I was going to vend or had some sort of plan, financial plan, or I was just like very financially well off, type of thing.
Yeah, as far as the grading question,
Yeah.
maybe you're aware. I know, the majority of people in the hobby know that back in 2001, Eddie Brenneschultz, E. Birdman, and I had a decision to make what grading company to go with. And him and I decided on PSA back then. And so at the time, you could search on eBay PSA Pokemon, and there would be 10 or 20 listings, and that's it for PSA and Pokemon, right? Nobody was doing it. The only ones were the ones I did in '99, the Japanese promos. So besides that, there were none. And so, yeah, PSA is definitely the figurehead of the hobby. Are there other ones that I like? And you mentioned SGC. SGC is an old timer. I have cards from SGC going back over 20 years. They've been grading for a long time. And they're very reputable, and I like them. But my new love is probably the automatic grading, the AGS, automatic grading service, robo grading. I think it's the way of the future. The money's not there. If you're comparing a 10 to a 10 PSA, the money's not there. But as far as personal collections, I like AGS, where they just grade by computer without the human eye, or overlooking stuff and things like that. But
would you say that's better?
I'm not going to say
Not have
it's
any
better.
human-
I'm going to say it's better because the computer doesn't miss dents. They don't miss things. Surface problems. They see it all, and so I think eventually that's going to be the way of the world for all the grading companies, and I'm kind of in on that from the beginning. Being an old timer, I'm not normally in tune with the new stuff like technology and things like that. But in this case, AGS, I think they have a terrific product, and they're getting better and better. And I know PSA has bought out somebody that's leading towards artificial intelligence. Now, if you're going to buy and you're going to sell in the next year or so, then I mean, I think PSA is probably the way to go. What do you think, Jake?
So I think I think that it does sort of pass the common sense test to me, or the sort of rational common sense to say that like in 5, 10, 15 years, like this AI grading, however long it takes to really feel comfortable, and then there will be an adoption period where people will fight against it, where people will be uncomfortable with it. You're going to have a lot of old timers or people who have a lot of invested in the old way, argue against it, say a bunch of negative things. But if it actually does what it's supposed to do, which is be extremely accurate and objective, just logically, you would think that they'd all have to go there eventually, or they would lose the credibility. Because
Right.
the fundamental thing that they're doing two things, right? They're authenticating, which is the key thing, like actually not making mistakes. And maybe the AI could be better at that. Again, this is not my area of expertise, like, but like if they could be, that would be great. Like if they could more easily, be aware of some of these like fakes and counterfeits, and as the fakes and counterfeits continue to get better, that sort of battle. And then with the grading, if it's more accurate, but we may be quite a bit of ways from that, and it's possible that like PSA is able to adopt that in a way that is effective. Now, I think one concern, like if you're speculating or investing in the long run on a lot of like really high graded cards, is what if the old cards like wouldn't pass the new grading standards because they have chips or they have dents and they snuck into these PSA 10 cases, these types of things. Like what does the market think about those cards versus the new AI graded ones? And that's just the stuff that like we don't know. And I think it's not going to happen all at once. Like it's going to be like a slow thing that happens in the long run. But like, I don't think new grading companies, like I would place my bet on like PSA and some of the more established ones, like that brand being more important than like a company who just is doing well with the technology like AGS. So like in the long run. But now if PSA and Beckett and CGC are unable to adopt that, and or
Yeah,
fight
so
it or whatever,
did
and
buy a company that was that did robo grading, and did they not just implement that, or have they kind of worked with it, or what has that been? And
It's
did
been
they
going
just
about a
buy it
year.
so they didn't have competition, or they?
Yeah, they've been going about a year. I've had cards graded by them, and they're very consistent. They definitely never missed anything. Like I've had some misgraded cards through Beckett's and PSA. The AGS, they don't miss any flaws. Plus, they show almost looks like X-rays on their website of your card, so you can understand why did this happen. Because sometimes some surface things you can overlook easily. And I should say one more thing. With AGS, I did name them Robo Grading. They came out a year ago here to Las Vegas just to show me their technology. And I said to them, why are you AGS? Why aren't you something like Robo Grading or something? Because all these 3-letter names. And he immediately got on his phone, reserved it, reserved that name. And so they became robo grading based on what I said. So that meant something to me, because that meant that they're willing to listen, and maybe they'll also in Denver. I don't know if you saw it, Jake, but they had this portable one about this size square that they're going to put into game stores, or you can buy privately, where you can grade your own. You can't encapsulate them or label them, but you can grade them. You can run them through, and you can see what grade they would get if you sent them in with no further damage. So I thought that was kind of cool too.
So in my view, I think the biggest competitor to PSA 10s today are AI graded PSA 10s in the future. It's not going to be these other graded companies, in my view, because I don't think the technology is the thing to bet on. I think the branding and the company is, and I think they'll all adopt it if it's good enough, and they'll probably all be able to replicate it, because I doubt there's going to be anything patented. Again, I'm talking outside. I'm really just speculating here, but I would be surprised if there was anything super patented, or because when we talk about companies, like anything that one of these grading card companies would have that would be such a competitive advantage that PSA having the market share and a lot of money to throw behind like couldn't catch up. And maybe that even looks like buying out AGS at a humongous, premium somewhere in the future. I don't know, it can look like a lot of things, but that's where I put my money. But that doesn't mean that's right. Like in 5 to 10 years, that could very well be wrong, and we could see a new grading company like AGS somehow take over. That's where I would place my bet if I were going to place a bet.
Would
Yeah,
you,
well,
do
with
think that-
AGS with PSA being bought, being bought out and taken off the public market, those guys are pretty sharp. And so, what you're saying, is a possibility. They could end up buying AGS. We never know. But I think it's safe to say that it will lean in the direction of AI. I don't think any question about that, because it'll be faster too and more accurate. So yeah, I
Did you have
hope
a comment or a question? I saw you were going to say
Sorry, what was
something.
that?
Did you have any
Oh,
follow-up?
I was going to say that, do you think that people that are, have a lot of PSA slabs, personally, most of my Pokemon cards are all in PSA.
Me too.
I've kind of been dabbling a little bit in BGS with the modern stuff. I just like the eye appeal of the full arts in a BGS 9 or 9.5. And it's kind of, I feel like in a way, PSA label kind of takes away from the card. And do you think that maybe a lot of people are strictly only PSAs because most of their collections in PSA and they don't kind of want the non-uniformity of other grading services
I
in the
think so.
collection?
I think so. I mean, I have obviously way more PSA. Although I, being not caring too much about the slabs looking the same, I have other ones too, and that doesn't bother me. But I do know for a lot of people, it does. They want that consistency, like you said.
I think it's significant, but I don't know. I wouldn't know how significant. And like, so for example, it's a really good question, right? Because the question really gets at the heart of like, okay, what if they weren't worth as much? Or because like, what part of the PSA market is just driven by everyone valuing it more and knowing other people are valuing it more, and so it just sort of keeps going and continues itself. It's not really necessarily producing more experiential value, but because we're all sort of in this agree that it's the best or the most expensive, the majority of people continue, it sort of it reinforces that, right? Versus it's something like that people just prefer PSA because they're comfortable with it, they're used to it, they have experience grading there, they have experience with the company, they trust the company more, and to your point, the majority of their collection is already in a PSA slab, so they want the uniformity of those complete things. I think all of the above, and to what extent each thing. It's why, like, if you're speculating or investing, that's all risk to some extent, right? So like, and what percentage of risk do you think all of these things are? I think that the best way to like minimize some of your risk on this is like really focusing on the card too, and not just buying the grading company or the grade or the case. You're really focusing on like, is the card really in good quality, good looking, and is the card itself desirable? Or am I buying a black label or an extreme version of a card that actually has a little bit of damage and shouldn't be a black label, and it's a $1 card that I'm paying $1,000 for? Like that's an extreme example of like doing the opposite of what I think value is. But like, that doesn't mean I'll be right. It's just that's my perception of these things and how I would go about it. I don't know. What do you think, Gary?
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, Belly.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
I've honestly been enjoying the content for a long time, and I figured I seen you guys were on. I was just kind of hanging out, sorting some cards, watching football, and I was like, "Oh, sweet, maybe I can jump in." So
there you go. Well, thanks for doing that.
I've been trying to think of, I actually haven't ever graded with a company, so I was trying to kind of, think of where I want to send it to. I was thinking, obviously PSA, or I don't know. I've been kind of enjoying Beckett because most of my cards are that I'm sending in are kind of just weird, like a couple Game of Thrones cards and some like Marvel sketch cards, and I kind of just enjoy them in a Beckett slab rather than the PSA slab. I
Okay.
just didn't know if it was worth maybe sending them there just because, it's a sketch card and it's like, does it really matter if it's graded or not? But I don't know. I was just kind of thinking about maybe sending something off.
Yeah, the sketch card market is interesting with that. I've seen it matter in some cases, but it's so hard with sketch cards because they're all one of ones and they're all different and the art is
Right.
so
I mean,
subjective.
I got
Yeah.
this for like $35. Like
Mhm.
it's just cool. You know?
Mhm.
So I was thinking maybe sending it to Beckett, but I'm not sure yet.
I think as a collector, my dilemma is a combination of things. It's like I have to like sell and do some market stuff to meet all my collection goals, right? And so although I'm constantly buying collection things and pieces and grading that way, I also have part of my mind saying, but what if I decide to sell this at a certain point to get another card that I really want? And so I'm balancing like what I like the best, like which case I like the best, or do I even like my cards graded, or would I prefer this card in a binder, right? So you're balancing like how would I like this card the best with like the resale potential in the future or in the present that's going to further my collection goals. So for me, I'm constantly having that conversation in my head. And there have been times like right now with Star Wars stuff, which I have a ton to send out to, I really kind of want to go with SGC because I like the way some of the thicker cards look in those slabs, and I just like and I have a number of those cards already in SGC slabs, but I'm concerned about
SGC
some of
does
the
seem to
resale
be
value.
pretty
You know, and,
popular in Star Wars.
yeah, but I'm concerned about the long-term resale value, and I'm a little bit concerned about that company potentially, and a little bit concerned with it's just tough. And when PSA, I can send it in for 15 or 12, or if it gets to $8 to $10, it's just hard to go with another company for me right now because of the resale value, even if I like them better as a collector. But it's all coming from a collector place. It's not coming from a business place. Does that make sense? Because I'm even selling to fund the collecting. You know what I mean? So I think that that's where people like everyone says just collect what you love and do what you love, but like there's the business side, and making those smart financial decisions then helps you afford the even better card, the card you even want more or something like that. So that's what I would say about it. I can't answer it for you, but I can definitely like
Yeah,
you
I
know
mean, is this like a sketch card even worth? Like, well, the Game
yeah.
of Thrones cards I think are kind of cool just because I like the Beckett with like the little, autograph in the corner. It just kind of stands out a little bit. It's just a little different. Whereas PSA, the slab, all it really says is authentic or auto 9 or 10, and it's just I don't know. It's just
So
You're
my
not
personal
going to sell it, right? You're not going to flip it right away, right?
I mean, I bought the card for like $60, and you know, I was kind of looking at the Beckett ones, and they're kind of selling for 250, 300. So I was
Right.
probably going to sell it right away.
I'd
Just bought another
I'd
raw one
probably
for
go with
mine.
Beckett then. That seems to be the one you like the appearance of, and I think that's a big part of it.
And Beckett for sketch cards, they have a pretty long relationship with that. And so now what I will say is with sketch cards, it's an interesting market, right? Because it varies widely depending on sort of the subjective appeal of the art, obviously the character, and then a big thing is sort of the artist, and then a little bit of a less thing, but sometimes significant is what set it comes from. Because some people collect certain ones from certain sets, or they like the older sets, like some of the first Star Wars sets that had sketches, like these types of things. So I would do a little bit of research into that to know exactly what you have, and like because when you're thinking like this sketch card is going for 250, is that because it's a great artist? Is that because it's a popular character? Like why is it? Or is it just like an average normal one of Yoda, and mine is actually a nicer one of Yoda, and I think it's going to go for more? Just having that, like going through that
Yeah,
thought, and you probably already
and I
have.
was kind of looking like, I
Yeah,
mean, this is just one of the sketch cards that I have, but
yeah,
I kind of like just the off weird kind of things, and there wasn't many sketch cards of Yoda with an actual lightsaber. It's usually kind of just a face shot portrait. So
sure.
you know it's kind of looking at stuff like that, trying to find a Luke with a lightsaber, and it's kind of it's kind of a fun little challenge to try to find the characters that are actually different.
For sure. Sounds like you know what you're doing, and you've been doing it for a while in those sketch cards. So I would trust
A little
yourself.
bit. I've been
I trust
branching
your
away from Pokemon, and I've been picking up different things. I kind of stopped buying Pokemon, uh, in a way, and it's just there's a few cards that I'm maybe kind of looking for, but other than that, I've been kind of looking at other areas and just kind of buying some fun stuff that I like.
I would trust your instincts, and generally speaking, as long as you're being cautious. And I think that you're a collector, you enjoy it, so you probably have a good sense of like what other people are going to like, or be attracted to. And
I'm not much
to
of a
me,
seller. I've sold
Yoda
a
with a
few raw
lightsaber
cards or
sounds
two.
pretty good. Generally speaking, in the Star Wars world, getting a lightsaber, getting a key character with a lightsaber is a plus.
Yeah, I honestly think so too. And I bought just a couple different characters with their lightsabers. It's just kind of cool to look through eBay and try to find the ones. So.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good night.
You too.
I'll still be here.
Thanks for watching.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have 2 more people in line right now to let the 2 of you guys know. If anyone else wants to jump in line behind them, we will go sort of one at a time. I'll put the link back in chat. So next up, we got Bondo. Bondo now it says. I know you buy a different name, but we got Bondo, similar name. And then after that, we got John. All right, guys. So thank you both for waiting. So Bondo will gonna bring you up on the stream right now. How you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, Jake? How are you?
Good. How you
Thanks
doing?
for having me. Hope the audio sounds okay.
Yeah, you got a deep voice. How it sounds.
Well, I'll try to speak loud then, and hope that helps out a little bit.
Oh, you're good. How
Sweet.
you doing?
Good. Nice to meet you over the screen, Gary.
Good to
Definitely
meet
have
you
seen
too.
a lot of your content over the couple of years, and one
Thank
of the
you.
first questions I had was kind of geared towards you, just because I remember years ago. I mean, I used to, and you'll get the reference, watch Pawn Stars all the time as a kid. It was probably one of my favorite shows, just in general, watching everything. And I obviously remember the episode where you went in and
Right.
you had your whole list of Charizard cards and everything like that. So the question's kind of more silly. It's not necessarily something super serious.
Sure.
But I was curious if Rick from Pawn Stars of V ever has spoke to you after the fact, now years down the line, and regretted maybe not working out a deal with you more, and how that conversation or relationship has grown. Because I know, I'm sure, do you still stay in contact with Chum Lee a little bit, and you talk to him?
Yeah, we get together every week for breakfast, and
nice.
and Rick, I just saw like 4 or 5 nights ago at this event at
cool.
the pawn shop, and you know what? He doesn't regret it, because he's like the classic example of a flipper.
Yep.
He would have bought those. Let's say that he would have bought those for $500,000. He would have tried to turn it that next week for $550,000.
Correct. Yep.
And so he's not good. It's not like he could have bought it for $500,000 and
Yes.
now they're worth $10 million.
Exactly.
And he lost $10 million, right?
Yeah.
He would have flipped them right away, especially a high dollar amount like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So no, he doesn't regret it. He's very grateful, though, to me, because that episode of Pawn Stars is the second most viewed episode in the segment, not episode, but individual segment.
Mm-hmm.
Second most viewed one in the history of Pawn Stars. And there's been over 2,000 segments. And that episode is number 2.
That's
and moving up. So
yeah. I've probably put a few extra views on that myself.
I may have myself.
Nice. Yeah, so that was kind of just checking in on that, because I've always wondered. I was like, I wonder if he's like up to date with how the Pokemon market has boomed. Which, if you have the internet, you probably have seen something, and he's probably looked and been like, wow, those cards are worth a whole lot of money now. So yeah, just kind of quick question. The only other question, I don't want to take up a lot of time. I know there's someone else waiting. And this is kind of towards Jake and towards Gary. So myself personally, I grew up, I had some attraction to vintage cards from my childhood, like opened some with my cousins and stuff, but never really got too attached to that original era. Now I'm finding myself getting back into more cards, but kind of like the EX era and beyond, like things along those lines. The question I had was, how do you see some of these mid-era sets? Like, how do you think they could perform in the near future? Because I've noticed, like, someone like myself, I'm 26, so I was probably like 8 to 12 years old when I was collecting this. I've been meeting a lot of people within the community that are like, oh, my favorite era is right around that time frame. How you think they might perform in upcoming years, if you had any attraction to them or nostalgia to them? I know that might have been something that you had taken part in years ago. Because I've looked through pop reports. I don't like study them. I don't have an exact accurate number of everything, but they're relatively low in the grand scheme compared to some very popular cards. And I feel like some of them might be lower than I would expect, considering how low the pop report is. So I'll let you guys take it away.
Go ahead, Jake.
What do you think, Gary? I was going to let you start, or do you want a
Well,
second to think about it?
No, I'm pretty opinionated when it comes to that sort of a question, because I know every era, every couple years, what was going on, all the way going back to the 90s.
Oh yeah.
And I heard what people said and what they thought. And Pokemon has just been, I know we went through a huge jump that recently, but pretty much Pokemon has just gradually gone up and up and up and up and up and up. It's just had a gradual increase. And I don't see any reason why that wouldn't continue, especially with those mid-era sets. There's a lot more fans or people your age, in the mid-20s to 30, that were into those than were into the base set in 1999. Way more in that. And so I don't see any reason to think that those won't continue that upward climb. And they really were terrific sets. I mean, the artwork, the marketing that went into them, and that they're really it's a terrific item, and I don't see any reason those wouldn't continue on and get better and better. And I mean, in 10 years from now, let's get together and discuss this again. And I think we're going to see I was right.
Yeah, I hope in 10 years I have a little bit more money to invest in some of those.
There you go. Right.
That's what I personally, actually even just yesterday, a friend of mine, he works at a sports card shop, but like we've been friends doing Pokemon for the last year or so. And a woman came in and sold him a bunch of like EX cards, like the holographics, and they may not have been in the best condition, but I literally saw the picture and I was like, oh my God, what? Please tell me you want to sell some of these. He's like, I'm going to keep all of them. I'm like, no way. Like just one. But like that's something where like I like a lot of modern cards now. I do appreciate the artworks that they've been putting out. But when I look back and I feel nostalgic and I'm like, oh, like remember trading cards when I was a kid with friends in school, and that like the one card that I'm hoping someday to reattain is the Unseen Forces Lugia EX. I had like a little binder in elementary school or something that someone took, and that card was in it that took me like 2 or 3 months to trade off a friend. And then I lost it because someone stole it from me, something like that. So even now, like, I feel like I'm going to take it to the grave, like a small bit of anguish towards that one card until I get it back. So like I do have that heavy nostalgia to that era in general.
And once you get that card back, all those bad memories will disappear.
Absolutely. That's what I hope for.
Yeah, I mean, to me, particularly the original Nintendo EX era being the first Nintendo era after Wizards of the Coast, like to me, it just has everything. It has amazing history, really great art, really great rarity, a variety of different art styles. Like I just think that it's beautiful, subjectively. So I would be surprised if it, one thing I think is interesting though to think about is like looking at, so during the hype, during the boom period, you had like first edition Jungle Pikachus and 1st edition Eevees from like Jungle selling for like $1,000 in PSA 10 right at the hype. But even now, like we're still talking like maybe $200, $250, $150, $180, depending on if it's like auction or what's going on, right? It's come down a considerable amount. But those cards are much more plentiful than just like non-holo rares from original Nintendo EX era. Like first appearances of like key characters and non-holo rares in those sets. So like my point in bringing this up is not to say that necessarily those are super undervalued, but it shows how much more demand and interest and awareness is in WotC.
Yeah.
Because when there's so much more interest, it goes to like every card and it moves everything.
Yeah, no,
like,
that's what I've noticed too.
You know, those sets, it was like really just the gold stars and maybe like some of the lowercase EX cards, right? Before the had value. Holos, like there was basically no one. I was picking up the holos for sub $10 in PSA 9s, you know, and PSA 10s were $20 each, right? So there was just no interest. There was no value yet in grading that. Then after the boom, you saw Gold Stars do their thing, or you saw the other, you know, and you saw everything move up, but it hasn't trickled down in price point, to my knowledge, yet, to where people are making a lot of moves on key Pokemon, grading the rares. Now, I have seen like them grade Rayquaza, like some of the things like, you know, or Charizard, and they're probably $100 or $200 examples of that. But like if you compare that to like first edition Jungle Pikachus, how many of those are out there compared to how many of like a rare from that set is, or even like a common, you know, the Jungle's also a very small set. Some of those sets are massive, are massively huge. So it's just interesting, and it's not necessarily like, you know, this is a pattern that I've seen, is that it takes a while to trickle down, and how far it trickles down really tells you the depth of like the interest in the market. And if you go through each era, like Black and White, we're starting to see like regular holos do a little bit better. Like people are starting to grade those. Like it's finally starting to happen in Black and White. Pearl, you know, starting to happen more in there. Obviously, before that, it was really just the X and Y full arts. It was just the full arts and X and Y that had real value, and it was just the in Diamond and Pearl, you know, we're talking, and the secret rares, of course, in those sets. And then the Diamond and Pearl, we're talking about, you know, level X's into primes, and secret rares in that. But like the holos were like 1 graded or 2 graded, you know, and now people are starting to grade them. So it'll just be interesting to see. I would track that stuff and see, are people buying these? How deep is the actual interest? How deep is the demand for those things? And if you continue to see those starting to sell and people starting to be interested in that, that'll be a really good sign that, like, to Gary's point, that like people are not forgetting about that era, and that the interest is like remaining there. And just because people didn't grow up with it doesn't mean they don't want it. And I'm very much in that camp, that like if you love Pokemon, that's enough to love any beautiful Pokemon card of your favorite. Particularly if it's like the first ever Rayquaza card, or has that like history to it. So that's what I would ramble on. But you know, everyone has bias, right? And interestingly, like I was talking to Squeaks about this, and Squeaks is like not necessarily original Nintendo EXer, I don't think, but he's like he's pretty down on like Diamond and Pearl, Black, like he thinks that those eras are going to be a wash. You know, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but basically just like it's not, because the demand was never there. So why are people going to go back and discover it? And he believes more in like the alt arts, and that even though Sword and Shield has way less rarity and isn't as old, the people are going to go back and want that more because they have more connection with it. I'm on the rarity train, and on the history train and the older train. Like I feel that's a lot safer than putting my money on that sort of demand. But I don't think either of us are wrong. Like I think both of us make, in my view, make good points, and I think that there's like there are arguments to be made on both sides of that. And I say it to illustrate how like two people who like are obsessed with Pokemon, both love Pokemon, both follow this like every day, super engaged, like see it differently. You know, and so what for people out there, it's sort of like, you know, place your like whatever you feel makes the most sense is what you should do. You shouldn't listen to like anyone. Content creators, what I would say.
And I think that's a very fair point because
Yeah.
I mean, when I first got back into it, right, like at the beginning of Sword and Shield, it was like kind of like I was doing a lot of learning of like older sets that I missed out on because I probably would say from like 2000 to 2006 would probably have been where I would get a couple packs, I'd open them, I'd go to school, I'd look at them, I'd enjoy them. And when I refound my binder and I looked through it, kind of like brought me back. But then I restarted collecting in 2019. So I have like a 13, 14-year gap where I basically did nothing Pokemon besides maybe the games here and there. But when I go back and I look through old sets, or like even like you said, some of the black and white hollows, like I look at them like this card is amazing. Like I really like the art, but there's not really any trend with it. There's nothing like sparking it. But to me, that's something where I'm like, I like this enough where I'd buy it for myself. If it has something down the line where it blows up in price, it doesn't need to, but I'd be happy. I mean, like we talk about a lot, like buy something you like, and if it goes up, it's great. If it doesn't go up, you have a card you really like. I'm very on board with that. And I've gone through and I've tried to find more like unique little hollows. Like I even just something random. My friend from work, he probably can't even see the card, but like it's just like a random little hollow card that he had in a binder, and I was like, honestly, I like that. I want to start like mini binder collections of some of my favorite Pokemon, and I've been picking up 30, 40, 50, $3, $4 cards, like something like that. That to me, maybe no one else really cares at the moment about, but to put it in a binder and look at it is something I can appreciate. So
Yeah, there's the personal connection. There's definitely something to be said about that. But just look at all the people that love the early sets, the base set and Jungle and Fossil and Here Comes Team Rocket and that's 1999.
Yep.
And yet you have, I mean, I get it all the time at the shows that I go to, where people, will show me, these kids, well, to me, kids, 20-year-olds and that are showing me their binders or want me to sign their binder. I sign it, I look inside, and there's a partially filled base set inside.
Yeah.
So they certainly don't have the personal connection to it, but they definitely have a love for it.
Yep.
So there's a lot to say about personal connection, but I think like what Jake was saying, sometimes there's two ways of looking at something, and they're both right.
Yep. It's cool. It's definitely cool. And like you said with kids, I went to like a small trade show maybe a month ago, and there was this one kid who was like, he was trying to work his trades, and probably like no older than 10 years old. And he would go and he'd be like, oh, I really want this, modern card you have. And then he would come back with a card. And he's like, would you trade it for this? And then he would go back and he would get a vintage card, and he would come back, oh, I got this older vintage card, and he would name this set, probably more knowledge than I had when he was talking about each set. He was like, it's from this set, it's the reverse hollow. I know it's worth around $10. Would you trade it for this? And it was like kind of impressive to see.
And the card's older than him.
Yeah. I said that. I was like, this card might be twice your age. Like I was collecting this maybe when I was your age back then. But it's very cool to see that like there is like still a growth within the hobby from younger children, like learning about these older sets, going back, taking the time to, discuss it with their friends in school. And then who knows, maybe that one kid comes back from a show with an old vintage card and everyone is like, oh my goodness, you got it. So
right.
It's cool. Very cool to see.
Yeah. I mean, I say it in almost every interview I do. I always use this, and that is the hobby is safe for 15 years after the last set is released.
Yeah.
And Pokemon releases set after set after set. It's going to continue to grow and be popular, for many, many years to come, and certainly well past my lifetime. And, maybe when you guys are my age, it'll be, it'll be about the right timing also for Pokemon's next new set. So
very true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for having me on. I don't know if
thank you, Bondo.
But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me, and I look forward to I'll be in the chat watching the rest of this. So
nice talking with you.
Talk to you guys too. Have a good one.
So John is up next, and I'll bring you on in just a second, John. I think the topic of like when we look at sports or when we look at comic books or when we look at things that have like these like pop or pop culture collectible or pop culture uh, um, type things that have like been in existence and had value longer than Pokemon.
Yeah.
You see these dead periods, like these periods that still have no value, even if it's managed to have like older stuff still has really great value and newer stuff's really has, and like in sports, it's the the old vintage, the stuff that had enough attrition, wasn't printed as heavily, and then you have the new serialized stuff having lots of value, and then you have,
Then you have the 90s.
99.999%. Obviously, there's some rare inserts from those eras of key cards that have survived. It'll be interesting to see if Pokemon can control the print run enough that doesn't ever happen. Because I don't think it's guaranteed to happen in Pokemon. I think some people feel like it's destined to happen for Sword and Shield and Modern, and I certainly have said that could happen, that we could be in a period now of sort of overprinting, that in 5 years from now, we might look back and say there was just too much of these sets for them to grow. But in the short run, it's completely not been that way, right? I mean, the fact that Evolving Skies is already at $240 a box, the fact that, all the modern booster boxes are like up to like $90 now, $100. It's at least in the short term, that is very much not the case. And so if you're a betting man, the only way for it to then become the case is if there's a lot of people here right now who are investing, who don't actually care that much about it, and who are hoarding the product to some extent, and then, or buying up the alt arts in some sort of like, speculative play, and then who's going to buy them down the line at a higher price. To me, that's the only way that prices really get crushed on these things. And it would have to be extreme at this point.
Right.
And, and it's highly possible that it's just a lot of collectors really, really like it, and that Pokemon controlled the printing enough, and a lot of the stuff was able to, be eaten up. We won't know for a while, but I'm really surprised that in this type of like recessionary, anxious environment, that we are seeing $240 modern booster box sets, when Wizards of the Coast, who's printing less Magic, is like, and other, TCGs and new things are coming out, are struggling to sell boxes at like $40, $50, $60, $70, $80, depending on
Right.
Magic, not down to 40 or 50, but other TCGs, yes. And then, Magic, some boxes, selling in the 70s and 80s and not really moving up or being hit. What do you make of that? And do you think it just shows how Pokemon is so strong? I mean, it's incredible.
Also, I think Pokemon is
Yeah.
so unique,
Yeah.
to those other examples. It seems like all the rules all these years just haven't seemed to apply to Pokemon. Yes, the last couple WotC sets, were very short printed. There was very low demand in that. But I mean, look at that today. Today, back then those boxes were cheap, and it was, really easy. I think I have 6 sets of all of the Sky Ridge. Those sets. I have 2 of every set, but I have like 6 of those because the cards were so readily available and the boxes were so cheap. Well, look at those now. 15 years later or 20 years later. The prices are prohibitive. It's Pokemon is almost seems to break all the rules.
Yeah. And I've had a theory that is something like non-sports cards in general are going to have a really good period here, and that it's going to broaden out into a lot of other things, with like Pokemon sort of like leading being one of the things that sort of lead the charge in that, with Fanatics buying up a lot of the tops and making a bunch of the product, with like Weiss get in animes, and Lorcana for Disney being a huge potentially a huge player in that. But the Pokemon strength relative to like everything else is just amazing. That already exists. It's
incomparable.
It really is. I mean, if you told me that we were going to be in this type of economic environment with this type of anxiety, with this type of interest rates, affecting, the stock market and the housing market and lagging a bit and probably will continue to affect it and potentially continuing to affect it negatively and interest rates continuing to rise. And you told me that now again, the job numbers are so good. We're not in a situation where people who are buying these are losing their jobs. It's just, it is still amazing that Pokemon has increased the print runs this much, and yet these sets can still sell that much. Although I do think it is strange that these things are those prices, and then when you go into like middle gen or even into WotC, I think that the new stuff is overvalued relative to that for me. And so I think that, but that's it's a personal sort of thing based on what I value, rarity, things like that. But I don't mean to go on and on about it, but
well,
it's
I'm not that,
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you on that because I get asked all the time, Gary, how did you know? I mean, I have massive amounts of all the oldest stuff.
Yeah.
And they say, Gary, how did you know? I didn't know. I just knew it was super cool, and I knew the kids loved it. My sons loved it. And I always worked hard and had good jobs. So I was able to hang on to what I bought. But I didn't know anything was going to happen value wise, right? That way. It just happened to happen. And I'm no smarter than anybody else. I ended up with all that just by pure chance, by pure luck. Although I'll tell you, it's not only Pokemon I have storage lockers full of stuff that you wouldn't pay $1 a set for. I just love TCG and I love collecting. I mean, I'm going to give you a little example, just things that I'm working on. I'm trying to complete more sets of, like Creature Feature, the original Creature Feature wax packs and that.
Yeah.
Or the Marvel. These are the Marvel 1995 Marvel Metal Parallels, right?
I have my complete set right there, and also the 1966 on the Creature. Yeah.
So, right. Yes.
I'm with you.
I love all sets, and I collect them all because I love to collect them all. And just because one took off crazily like Pokemon did, it doesn't mean I was smart. I wasn't. I just collected what I loved to collect, and I was never in the position where I had to sell. So call it. I mean, I think rather than being smart, it'd be a lot closer if you just said I was lucky. Seriously.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can I get a tour of some of your stuff someday?
Oh, sure. Yeah, some. I don't go into my store. I have 3 storage lockers. Well, I have 4, but 3 in different states.
Yeah.
And I don't do much. I don't. Those are all completed collections and things that I don't. All my Pokemon cases from back then and all that stuff is stored actually in different states now. So, but I mean, I have things. I have things all around me, here that are things that they're not high value because I don't keep super high value stuff here. But they're things that I enjoy trying to complete another set of them and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, value is enjoyable, but it's not what drives me fundamentally in this.
Right.
I love finding something new and cool and collecting it and learning the history and learning like the errors and the different variations and all these types of things, and particularly stuff that like nobody knows about. I love the thrill of like that sort of thing.
Yeah, very cool.
Look through your stuff. I also like 2 of my goals in the hobby. I don't know if you're aware, but one is to put on like a convention and to start doing more in-person meetings. But to this point, the other thing is to start a card museum or a card, with the history of TCGs spreading all the way back to tobacco cards, and even to playing cards, like revolutionary playing cards that are 400 or 500 years old, so like, and the history of sort of cards and games and all these types of things. So I'm working on tons of sets and
Yeah.
and always trying to grow my knowledge, in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Right now I'm like learning about some of these like English only sets that I've never came across, with like Dickens characters and like all sorts of things that I've never seen before. Like there were so many things that were printed. There were so many cards that were printed all over the world. So it's awesome just like learning. And I love these, like I talk to guys who are like 70 years old, 60 years old, like all the time, who've been doing this their whole lives, and they're the ones that teach me often about these cards, and they learn from someone else, and that's how old some of these things are. So
Yeah, well, that's how I was too. I mean, I started my first trading cards. I collected other things before this. When I was 5, 6 years old, I was collecting football player bottle caps, and I would go to gas stations with a magnet and bring up all the bottle caps, trying to complete sets when I was 5, 6 years old. But in the mid 60s, my first sets I was collecting was Addams Family and Munsters cards, and that came out back then, black and white cards, and so that's you're kind of describing me there. It's been my entire life, what I've enjoyed my entire life, and I've pretty much held on to most of the things that I wanted to.
So have you thought about doing a museum yourself?
Well, I've actually been confronted with that. They were going to do a Collecticon museum, a traveling museum, but it would have been too expensive for them to use some of my stuff, because they would have had to have insurance, proper security, because that stuff, when it has gone up so high, it's ridiculous. And yet they would have to, people will kill you over a TV set. So just imagine what they might do if you put something like that together. Even at these famous art museums, there's been robberies and things like that. So I have thought about it, but it would be nervous time for me, to put too much of this stuff in one place.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting thing. I think that something like, so what Mile High Comics has accomplished, I'm sure you're familiar with Mile High Comics and what they've accomplished for comics. I think that would be doable with cards. And the vast majority of what Mile High Comics is like, you don't need to have $1 million items or many $1 million items to create something really cool. And there's so many amazing cards and items that are under $1 right now from all different eras that I think are awesome. That like, yes, people here are like mostly into Pokemon, and Pokemon is like my heart or the core, because it's what I collected as that in sports cards. But Pokemon was connected with me on a whole nother level than sports cards did when I was a kid. But like, if you're a card collector and you love cards in general, there's just mountains of awesome stuff. And I think that I want a place where people can come and like ask questions and learn about stuff and see all this stuff. And it would just be a cool personal goal. And then just a great place for people to come, and maybe you have conventions, but this stuff is not money making stuff. This is very much like, you're probably losing money on doing all of this for sure.
Right.
And it has to be done. It's why I ask you, it has to be done from a person or a group of people who are very financially secure and can do that sort of generous thing for the hobby. So we'll see, whatever. So John, I want to bring John on next.
Yes.
Hi there, John.
Hey, Jake. Hey, Gary. I hate to distract you from that conversation, because I really hope one of you guys put that together at some point.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
I'd travel across the states for sure.
And like Rusty and Charlie, like, people have expressed interest. So I think that these are the types of things that, as long as we all stay interested, like, it's kind of only a matter of time, but it could be a long time, because we're all very young and early in our careers, and the financial, it sort of one thing at a time, but it would be sick.
John, let me ask you, what are those what's the artwork behind you there?
Yeah, so the pre-release kind of thing they have at game stores, I kind of got that from one. Then the Kanto Jodo, all the just locations and stuff. So I just love looking at that. This is my office, so it's fun to kind of turn around if I'm kind of stressed out and just look at all the cool stuff I have. So
There you go. Yeah, I like that too. Like you can see, stuff behind me. I just like looking at it and it calms me down.
yeah, and then I'm tinkering. I'm tinkering with trying to make a ghastly that smokes down there, so like a vapor comes out of it. So kind of add to the. Maybe I'll get in your museum or something.
Cool. Yeah.
But no, loving the conversation. One question I had is during the kind of drier eras of Pokemon, what were some ways you kind of had talked about making sure it stays alive and keeps growing?
Well, for me, a whole lot of it was very thought out. It was very. I was very close. I am very close, but like a brother to E. Birdman, Eddie Brenneschultz, and back in 1999, him and I, and all the way for the next 3, 4, 5 years, we talked almost daily about Pokemon and about the hobby. And when the interest started to wane a bit, like in 2001, 2002, him and I would spend hours on the phone trying to think of what can we do, to lift the hobby up. And that's when we came up with PSA grading and focusing on PSA grading. I think, like I said earlier, probably 10, 20 items would show up if you typed in PSA Pokemon. Maybe 10, 20 items. That's it. Now there's a million, right? Well, back then, that's what we did. We decided that by bringing PSA into it and using that grading company and having a good relationship. I've been grading with Joe Orlando at PSA since 1995. And so having that relationship to start with, that kick-started the hobby all by itself. And sure, there's little things we did here and there, and there's little things other people did that certainly helped. But that was a major boost, card grading.
So did you try to apply that to the other card stuff you were talking about earlier?
Say again?
Did you try that with the other card stuff you were talking about earlier?
You mean different card games besides Pokemon?
And to add to that, Gary, why did you choose Pokemon to specifically kind of focus on, and why did you choose Pokemon to try and grow that one versus the others?
That's a good question.
Yeah, because I think that's what you were sort of getting at, John, right?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I'll tell you the main reason. I can say in 2 words: Jay and Devin, my 2 sons. They were born, I think, in 1990, 1991. So they were like 8, 9 years old when Pokemon came out, and they loved Pokemon. And I always like to participate in the stuff they enjoyed, and so we had and have a lot of common interests. So the main reason it was Pokemon was because as a family, that's what my kids loved the most. We would drive out of state looking for Pokemon stuff. So that's probably why we landed on Pokemon, at the time. Had they loved Magic the Gathering, I have Magic going all the way back too, but just as part of my private collection, nothing dominant like Pokemon. And that's why, because I think it's mainly because my sons were into it.
Awesome.
And did I grade the other stuff? Well, not really. A few Magic, some of the valuable Magic cards I did grade. Some of the more expensive Dragon Ball Z cards, some of the Yu-Gi, the most expensive ones that I wanted to preserve, and I still have them all. The ones I wanted to preserve, I did grade them. But if there was 100 Pokemon, there would have been about 4 or 5 of those other sets that I would have graded. It was all Pokemon.
Was the thought process with grading to add like a added rarity to it?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, well, you got to remember something else. Like until this year, I have never paid more than $8 to grade a card, and I've graded the biggest cards in the hobby. I have never paid more than $8 to grade a card. Period. Until this year, when I sent some things and I got hit with those upcharges and thousands of dollars and that, but that made it so it was very affordable, back then, where I could grade every single thing I wanted to, and it was $8, $7, $4.50 they had specials for at times, $4.50 a card. So I'm lucky there because suddenly all my graded cards have graded card value. Just the grade that when they were charging $50 for some and with upcharges of $1,000, mine only cost $7, $8. And so I have that extra value, right?
That's awesome.
That I didn't have to pay for.
One thing I would say, sort of in response a little bit to your question, John, is one thing I think about is like, what level of the hobby would we be comfortable with it? Like, do we need it to keep growing? Or if the hobby shrunk a little bit, would I still enjoy it just as much? Would you still enjoy it just as much? Would everyone here still enjoy it just as much? And like, what level of the hobby is healthy and like fine, rather than this need of like, we always need to grow. If multiple generations don't get into it, it's going to be worthless and die, and we're all going to hate it. It's like, because like back in the day when Gary was doing it, it was like, the hobby was really small. Now it's like there's all these shows, there's social media, it's like, how much bigger does it need to get bigger? Even if it shrunk some and prices went down some, would it still be like really fun and worthwhile being in? And then how small would it be where it would really damage it? That's stuff that I think is interesting, and kind of related to your question. Because I know for myself, like, I would really miss the conversations. I would really miss things like the collecticons and the shows and having people come up. I would miss the busyness. So like if the hobby shrunk and there were less people in it, that's the stuff that I would miss immediately. I would still collect because I'm collecting 30 things that no one in the world is collecting. Maybe just me and Gary. You know what I mean? So like the collecting part is a sort of a private thing, and there's enjoyable elements of that. And maybe this is part of why you tried to grow the hobby, Gary, because you wanted it to be sort of that social experience, and you wanted business and people to be involved in it. But
because it wasn't just me and my boys;
Yeah.
It was entire huge communities.
Yeah.
So it was a partially that too. Sure.
So that's what I would say. So I think that sometimes the worry that I hear sometimes is maybe like there's quite a range of outcomes that could happen where the hobby could still be incredibly enjoyable for 90% of us or 95% of us. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's like important to remind ourselves when we're worried, too overly worried, that it's going to completely die or these types of things, or potentially in those down periods, or more down periods. Are we in a down period now? Are we in a stabilizing period now? Are we still in an up period? Who knows?
Right.
It's all relative. We're in a down period from 2 years ago. We're in a still way up period from 3 years ago. And we're in a way, way, way up period from 10 years ago, and an even bigger up period from 15 years ago. And this month, Gary, Dan did in our Patreon, Dan did a presentation on booster box prices over the years. And we were actually going to reach out to you to maybe fill in a couple of prices or to get your opinion on some of it as well. But it was very interesting to see just how cheap things were at different periods. And then you had, a little bit of a surge in 2011 and 2012 in prices, and then another surge in 2016 and 2017, and then another big surge in 2020. And you can really see it in all the booster boxes and that sort of movement. And it's just cool. Like, we're lovers of the history, of the hobby. It's cool to be able to see in the data.
Well, let's put it this way. I brought 122 cards into the pawn shop, for the Pawn Stars episode. 122 gem mint Charizards. And all of them good ones, all of them, WotC era, right? And I was asking $500,000. Whereas now just one of those cards might be $1 million card, the Beckett 10, right? So yeah, it really is crazy. It really is crazy when you think of it that way, what the prices used to be and what the fair prices were. That was top retail in 2016. That was top retail because I didn't want to sell them and I knew Rick wouldn't pay full value for them, right? So I knew I was safe, that I would promote the hobby and I wouldn't risk losing any of my cards. And yeah, so now what's happened now, and like what happened 2 years ago, things have probably dropped in half what they were 2 years ago. What I could have sold all those Charizards for, maybe 20 million. They've dropped in half now, and none of that matters. None of that makes any difference at all because I would have never sold them anyway. And yeah, so that I always compare it to that. That those boxes, sure, they were cheap. They were only $40 in 1999. To get them directly from WotC. And now they're 20,000 or whatever box you're talking about. I see a steady increase. I don't see. Of course, there's been, like you said, 2012 it jumped up, came back down. 2016 jumped up, came back down. Last couple of years up and down, but they all ended up hitting that plane of a steady increase. Get rid of those spikes and you still have a steady increase. So,
although I will say that Hummels had a steady increase.
oh,
I mean, but it goes to your point earlier of like, it's unlikely because the game's still so popular, new generations are coming in, right? It gets to that when you're trying to predict when we're at a height and when things are going to start steadily going down in any sort of pop culture hobby, which is inevitable.
Right.
If the pop culture hobby doesn't just continue to engage, because this whole hobby is dependent on interest.
Yes.
There's no, this is not food and water, right? So the whole hobby is an IP that depends on do people like it and are people interested? And that means that it doesn't have to just go up forever, right? But to Gary's point, like we have seen that trend and we may continue to see that trend. It probably, I would, I've talked a lot on this channel about how like I'm, out of a 10, I'm like, 3 to 4 on more of that. We will continue to see that trend in Pokemon, will continue to go up. And some other people talked are more on that like 8 side where they think, yes, possible, but I feel more like we may be at the highest point ever.
I wouldn't be concerned.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be concerned until they stop making sets.
Yeah. I also think that a lot of it has to do with thinking about price point and thinking about like when these items become very expensive, so many less people can afford them. And then who's going to continue to buy them? And that's when rarity comes, when you have items selling for $1,000 or $2,000, but there are hundreds of thousands of them. That's a tough, it's much harder to understand and support the math behind something like that than an item selling for $1,000 or $2,000 when there are 20 of them or 30 of them in the world. So, so I do want to, I want to actually grab, normally we don't do this, but I just think it's a really good question and it ties into what we're talking about here. So Pokemon Hollow says, how do I stay confident in Pokemon's future when you have a big Pokemon collection? Because I could sell more, but I don't really want to sell more. If prices fall back too far, it would be a mistake. And so I think that what this question is getting at is this potential anxiety that a number of people I think can probably relate to of like, I really like my cards, but I have a lot of money in this stuff. I'm early in my career. I'm not in Gary's stage where if my Pokemon plummets 90%, I still have $1 million in Pokemon and I'm towards retirement, right? I might have 80% of my net worth in Pokemon or something huge where I'm very uncomfortable, but I really don't want to sell because I'm a collector fundamentally. But if prices were to fall, I would feel that regret. because I probably should have sold for my life, like, and to make my life better. And I think it's just an amazing question. And it's a very personal question. It's a personal dilemma. Like, no one, I think, can answer this for any one person.
Right.
But I don't know if you guys have thoughts on this, but I think it ties really well with what we're talking about.
What do you think, John?
Yeah, well, I actually kind of had a question that tied to that with do you think it's healthier for the Pokemon market to kind of have a mania every few generations, or do you think it's healthier for now that like a majority of the original fans are now in their good earning career years, that it'll see a kind of constant growth? Like, which would you classify as being healthier, and which is more likely?
Go ahead, Jake.
Do I think it's healthier for mania or no mania is the question.
Yeah.
I don't really know the answer to that, honestly. Like, I think that there are positive things that I mean, the amount of exposure that happened all at once, like I guess I would say the positive is the amount of exposure and intention and momentum really grabs a lot of eyes. So many content creators who really don't care that much about Pokemon talked about Pokemon this year because it was the trend. This is not Logan Paul, who actually really likes Pokemon, but lots of content creators who don't really, not that they don't like Pokemon or hate Pokemon, but they saw the trend because it was so intense, and then they made videos about it because their job is to like go on the trend and trend to trend to trend. You had lots of news articles. Like, you think the media and news places care at all about Pokemon cards? Not specifically. They care about talking about the news. And because things became valuable enough or expensive enough, we even saw news articles. My mom, people in my family came to me and talk about Pokemon cards and articles and things that they had seen in their life about it, right? And all of that exposure is really good for the hobby. The negative is like the intense sort of like the people who lose a bunch of money, the people who get caught up in it, have that really negative experience, and then the sort of the fear cycle that comes from that. That's a negative. The scams and the like nefarious people who latch on to that sort of thing and use it as a moment to sort of cheat or take advantage of like newer people and not treat them well. I think that's, though, is inevitable in any sort of like really up thing. So I don't know if I can answer it good or bad. It's more like there are good pieces and bad pieces, but we're in a good place. We're, you know, I would even say, I mean, the hobby is in a phenomenally great place, really. Like you know, there's negativity, there's drama, there's these things, but like, if you're really being objective and you compare this to any other time in the hobby, like the hobby is in a phenomenally great place. And I'm sure Gary would agree with that, having been in this hobby the wole way through. It's like,
yeah,
so
I'm confident also. But as far as that question,
yeah,
I feel to sell just because you think it's a good time to sell, I don't think is a good enough reason to sell. Now, I was just looking for it. I got a message today from a guy that I've worked with. We've traded and sold and bought for 20 years. And he has a monster collection. And he loves Pokemon, and he always has. And he just sent me a list of what he has, and he says that he's interested in selling now because he just had a new child, and there's this amazing property that he wants to buy. I think that for somebody selling or getting out of it for the right reason, I see nothing wrong with that. To do it just because you're trying to guess the market or something, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to understand that stuff. But if you have something that you really want more than how badly you love your collection, then I can certainly see it. I wouldn't begrudge anybody, you know, for doing that. So does that make sense for as far as that question was concerned?
I think so. I mean, I think that it's such a personal decision, right? So like the psychological anxiety of like having 90% of your net worth in Pokemon or something like that is going to be completely different for every single person out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's going to depend on like how much are your expenses, how much are you making, like are you in debt, or are you like in actually a pretty good financial position, and you're young and you're going to make a lot more money and you're fine having 90% of your money in Pokemon. Like that's a very different scenario than like I'm in a lot of debt and I have a huge amount of Pokemon and I'm not taking anything off the table. One thing I talk about is affording your collection. And to me, it's like there's a huge psychological piece of affording. Like, and everyone, what that means is going to be different. So, like, for me, what that means is going to have to do with like how much I love my cards, and then also like what I'm comfortable with in terms of what percentage of my net worth or how my job is doing or other areas in my life are doing. And if I'm selling more to like fund a wedding or to fund getting a house or these types of things, I would rather not, but I'm doing it because the market's gone up quite a bit. It's an opportunity to do that. And those things are important to me. And I know I'm going to be collecting my whole life and I'm reinvesting the majority of everything I'm doing back into everything. So like that, for me personally, that's where I'm at. I think that it's very reasonable if you are out there, like to take some risk off the table, to sell some items that have gone up a lot, to put yourself in a better buying position so that you can buy more cards. Certainly if you're going to be paying your bills or if you're going to be, and that, but like, it's hard to tell another man that or woman that, you know, that's a very personal decision, and people are allowed to live in a lot of debt and have a large Pokemon collection. And to be honest with you, it's just money. Like, this is not, you're not murdering people. People in debt are not murdering people. Like sometimes people, like debt gets too bad of a rap almost on like an emotional, psychological level. Like it can be very stressful and like it's not good financially, but like tons of people live in debt. People go bankrupt. People have bad experiences. Like I'm not suggesting any of that, you know, and it's not good financial health, and you'll probably be psychologically much happier and have healthier relationships if you like figure out how to be like financially healthy and in the green.
Right.
But it's just very personal decisions that like everyone has to, you know, make for themselves. So
True.
Yeah, my answer as a 23-year-old accountant with very little life lessons is that if you're worried about it, like not financial advice, but like 401k, start doing traditional investing where it's more safe. Where I see like this is just more speculation, but yeah, I don't have life lessons, so
I
It's
definitely,
that's very good advice, though.
yeah. And
Diversify, right?
yeah. And for me, like, I am not someone who fundamentally views Pokemon as investing. The investing parts of Pokemon are for fun because it's fun to think about markets.
Me too. Yeah.
And to buy a bigger and bigger collection because I want to have the largest or one of the, you know, really large collection, or a collection that spans every decade. And the only way to do that in a financially, you know, reasonable way is to think of this stuff as an investing and speculating and doing some of that. But nothing in Pokemon from an investing standpoint is supporting any of my like day-to-day expenses or needs like that. And that's how I feel. Okay. But other people out there, they have full-time businesses doing this. And so the question, it becomes a lot more. And it's why you have people like Squeaks, like Dan, like Nick, like so many people who say that they can't view anything as a collection. Everything they have has to be inventory. Or if it's a collection piece, they have to separate it, and they have to like, it's a different sort of psychological thing for them. And everyone handles it differently, but.
Right.
So, John, any other question or comment or anything before we bring our next person on?
Nope. Just super excited. Glad I got to talk to you guys and pick your guys' brains. So thank you so much.
Nice talking to you, John.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Okay. So right now, in a second, I'm going to bring on Hank.
Mm-hmm.
How you doing, Gary? You hanging in there?
Yeah.
You're doing good. Okay. If you need to go or you need a rest or a break, we these can run for a long time. So just let me know. Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of good until Twan and Akara get home. So
Okay.
whatever time they get home, that'll be the end of it for me. But in the meantime,
They'll let you know.
yeah.
Okay.
She's watching, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. She said, "Don't try to bring me on." she just texted me, "Don't try to bring me on." I said,
It was nice getting a chance to meet her briefly in Denver in person.
yeah, she's a dandy. Very lucky.
Okay, so if anyone wants to jump on, Hank is the only person waiting right now. So I'm going to bring Hank on. If someone else wants to get in line, the StreamYard key I just put in the chat. Okay. So you can be at the front of the line. Okay. All right, I'm bringing you on, Hank. Hi there.
Hey, Gary. Hey, Jake.
Hi, Hank.
How are you guys?
Good.
Good. Nice to chat with you guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
Same.
Just to say, I've been following Gary for a long time. I like everything you're doing with Autism Instruct and everything. I follow that.
Thank you.
And yeah, that's really cool to follow. And let's keep doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that means the world to us. That's what it's all about for us now.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just enlightening to see and something fun. There's a lot of crap going around that's just a whole nothing
Right.
like that. But
Mhm.
no, you definitely help a lot of people and put smiles on a lot of faces.
Yeah, well, it's not just me. It's
Oh yeah,
Steve Aoki has played a huge part in it. Michael Waddell from MetaZoo, I mean, he's played a huge part in it. All of our little girl, we have an 8-year-old daughter with autism. She makes it all worth it. Just every time I look at her face, she makes it worth it. And now we're trying to expand the charity a bit, and we've already done so well, but it was with the help of all of those other people that we were able to do it. So we're grateful for that, and thanks for bringing that up. It means the world to us.
oh, no problem. Thanks for sharing it. That's how I found it on your Instagram, and it's kind of how I got here.
Oh,
So yeah,
okay, yeah.
new to your YouTube, Jake, but just subscribed and put the notifications on for that.
Good.
Oh, appreciate that, Hank.
For sure.
I've been on Jake's channel. I don't know, maybe 4 times, 5 times or something.
Okay,
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'll see you quite a bit through this also.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
been working a bit, but yeah, just got on Instagram. Like, all right, I'll come in, say hello.
Wonderful.
That's awesome, Hank. Do you have any specific questions or things you're wondering about for Gary while you're here? Or you just want to kind of hang out? Because you're welcome to hang out with us.
Yeah, for sure. I got a couple questions for even both you guys. Pick your brains a little bit.
Sure.
I got a pretty large collection, mostly like modern stuff, and the vintage is mostly just cards, nothing really sealed vintage.
Mhm.
But what do you guys think about vintage versus modern? Because my goal probably now is I'm collecting a decent amount of side modern stuff. Like I'll get 2 ETBs, open one, keep one. And
Good idea.
back when Shining Fates was kind of hard to find, I went and traded like 5 of those to get something off an XY Evo box, and just kind of trading up to get something nicer and nicer. But eventually I think I might just want to reconcile to get an old vintage box, like something like a Team Rocket or something. I'm not even sure, but
Right.
I have a couple vintage cards, but even with PSA grading right now, I think I might even wait a year or two, because I sent a couple batches and it took almost a year and a half. So it's like, I might even wait I think in a year or two, it might calm down a bit and just get some nice prices, because I'll keep them in the binder until then.
Good
It's
point.
just like, but I don't, that's like a lot of people with reselling aren't getting a good deal too. That's what I was wondering too. These cards you see for like $20, PSA 10s, like it could be a random PSA 10 on eBay for $20. And that's just like, well, do you think that could be like down the road? PSA could be $40, $50 a card, no matter what, to be graded. And that could just be a grab right there, just because it's a 10, those $25 deals and stuff.
I like those. I like PSA graded cards that are way under market, because not everybody wants a graded card. A big percentage of people don't, and so sometimes those fly under the radar. And and I certainly like under market graded cards. I think they're a real good investment myself.
Do you have a lot of modern, or are you just strictly vintage?
Yeah, I have sets and I have some boxes, but because I have so many collectibles, I'm working on so many things. I just don't have the time, to really dive in too much into modern.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I showed some sets earlier, but I also do other things, like, I collect stamps too.
Okay.
And these are my lists of stamps I need. And, I just want to give you an idea. All stamps from the 1800s.
Oh,
I
wow.
just love collectibles, and so these are things I've collected since I was a kid, and you can only do so much. You only have so much time. So I'm not as much into the modern as I wish I was, as I could be, because number one, it's great stuff. These are great sets, and number two, they're I think they have great, future prospects. I really do. So, but a guy only has so much time, right?
Yeah.
So not as much as I'd like to. I wish I did. Had a bigger presence in modern.
Okay. Yeah. Do you think if you were about 20, 25, you'd be stacked up on a whole bunch of modern boxes right now?
I love the way you do it. I love the idea of buying two of something and saving one. The thing is that you can always open a box, right?
Mm.
But you can't seal it back up. At least most can't.
Yep.
But
Right.
so keeping something sealed and opening one, I think, is kind of the ideal situation, because you can open them, you can get that thrill, you can get that enjoyment, and yet you always have that one in reserve that looks awfully pretty on a shelf.
Yep.
That's still sealed up.
The hard part is when you don't get really good pulls out of the one you open, and you're like, "Oh, I know the Charizard's in that one on the shelf."
I've been through that.
Mm-hmm. But what
What
about
about
you, Jake? What do you have behind you? That's all just. Are those like ETBs or booster boxes? Sorry.
Got a variety of things from every era. So for me, I think rather than thinking like modern versus vintage, try to think about it's all supply and demand at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is just supply and demand. And so these labels of like what is modern, what is vintage, like why is that an important discussion? What do we really mean by that? And I think we're trying to get at some like key concepts of rarity. So rarity is the amount of something that was printed, right?
True.
Scarcity is a little bit more of a complicated concept of the amount that is available at any given time. So if an item was printed a lot, but there's a ton of demand, it can actually be fairly scarce. There could be one copy of something in the world, but if no one ever wants it and it's always on the market, that item is not scarce at all. It's just rare.
True.
Right. So, and that's that interplay between supply and demand where it becomes important. And so now when we think about like the supply side is a good place to start. Now we don't have exact supply numbers in Pokemon unless you're looking at like graded cards at any one given time, looking at the population report. But we have like, to shill my Patreon, right? 1 month we did a presentation on like how much of each set we thought was printed, and like which set, and based on like some historical data that we got from Pokemon, the random things we got from NASA, one of the pieces of data, like they're because they did a collaboration with Pokemon once, like there's a lot of like trying to piece that together.
Mm-hmm.
But you can start with that rarity, with that supply issue. You had Pokemon say we printed 9 times more cards a year ago than they printed probably 2 years before that. So there's a 9 times increase. So items are 9 times less rare, the booster boxes, potentially maybe, than some of those booster boxes that are in terms of the amount that were ever printed. Now the amount that are opened, then you go to that next thought. And to Gary's point, like booster boxes are always being opened. So theoretically, it's always going to become rarer if you actually have the sealed product over time. Now, as far as like demand or trying to predict demand, I think it's very difficult to do. I think I like to think about like what are people going to want in 5, 10, 15 years? What are people going to come back to? What and to me, it has to tell a story. It has to be historic. Is it the first of something? Are there cards in it that connect enough with people that they're going to want to come back to it? And you can answer those questions for yourself. I think that first appearances and some vintage stuff has like there can never be another of that. There could always be another cool looking, crazy looking, gold alt art rainbow thing.
Yeah.
But there can't ever be the first appearance of Charizard again. They can't ever be so it's part of why when we look at like other collectible hobbies, like the original Batman is selling for 2.6 million or 3 million in high grade.
Crazy.
Whereas a modern variation cover of Batman is $80 or $40 in a high grade. And that but from 1986. So the comic book is from 1986 and it's still $40 or $80. But the original one, is now 2. So looking at those types of things are interesting to see how things age and what has that sort of long-term demand, what keeps that long-term interest. That's what I'd be thinking about. I can't answer it for you, and I clearly right now, all of these sets are on fire and have been on fire and they're all going up. And if you want to like ride the wave of, I'm just going to buy like one of every booster box or two of every booster box, as long as this like continues and they might just continue to go up. I don't think that's like crazy. That is what literally has been happening and continues to happen right now. But I prefer to think a little bit more of like to do things and buy things that maybe are a little bit less known or a little bit more kind of under the radar. It tends to be what I speculate on.
Yeah, like fun, different air cards, whatever. Just stuff you see and is cool.
Niche stuff, stuff that's fairly low pop, wasn't printed that much. Exclusive promos, but like that's personal to me. That doesn't mean that that's going to do better financially or anything. That's what I would say. But if you're ever asking yourself should you buy something? Ask yourself, what are the supply fundamentals, and then what are the demand fundamentals, and then try to come up with that answer. That's what rather than thinking like vintage good, modern bad, or modern good, vintage bad. Like anyone who's thinking in those terms is not thinking very deeply, right off the bat, right, about like what these items actually are, because these items will be vintage in 20 years or 30 years or whatever. They can change, they can have a different label over time, but will they ever be as rare? Will they ever be the first appearances? Will they ever be? No, they won't be those things. And will that matter? Well, it's mattered in these other hobbies, but maybe it won't matter in this hobby because maybe Pokemon isn't overprinting like they overprinted those comic variations based on demand, or they overprinted those like, football and baseball and some basketball sets in like the 80s and 90s where you can buy full completed sets for
like $20. Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
No, yeah, that's really nice. That's a really good insight. The only thing I'd say to me, the difference of like being able to collect them is like the old stuff at this point that I'd want to open that I had when I was a kid, like base set jungle. It's just, I'm not going to pay $200 a pack and be able to rip that thing open, and
ripping is not a good investment financially.
No.
It's an investment in an experience and fun.
For sure. And like the new stuff, it's like, I'd rather spend $200 and get like, almost 100 packs, whatever. It depends on what it is.
There you go.
I'm with you. And I think it's part of why modern prices, it's like, do I think a modern booster box should be worth more than a vintage pack? I'm not sure as like a value investor mindset. But as far as the experience of, if I open a fossil pack, it's over in 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 15 seconds. But if I buy like 5 booster boxes that are $80, I can open for hours.
Yeah.
And even if I'm not like as excited about any one pack, like the experience of that might be more fun than the one pack, or it's probably a lot more fun. So that's, it's I think it's, interesting things to kind of think about and maybe theorize of why prices are the way they are right now.
Yeah. And if you really open Vivid Voltage, you don't care how much they print because the Pikachu's not real. It's just like I've opened probably way too much of vivid voltage, and I have about 10 regular VMAXs that are
Right.
rainbow. So it's
Mhm.
like, they could print it. If it's $1 a pack, I'm fine with that.
Any other questions or anything, Hank, for either of us? Or
I don't know too much. Not really. You guys answered a lot and really insightful on some just investment tips and long-term strategies. Really,
Matt,
it's just like,
do you know Pokemon Classics?
mm-mm.
Heard of him? He has a channel. And his name is Matt, and he has a really good video that he just put out recently. That's like a lot. That's very well edited and a lot more concise than the ramblings that I just said. That kind of goes into the points I just made in a more kind of concise way. I think that you may not need. It might be redundant for you to watch that because you're like deep.
No, I'll definitely check it out.
But I think it goes into it in a very digestible way and talking about like the different fundamentals of like where value likely comes from and,
Oh, yeah.
and what will hold
And
in the long run.
You
Yeah.
got to be a sponge in the game to go anywhere. So you always got to just soak in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is one of my absolute favorite YouTubers and one of my absolute favorite people too. He's a high school teacher, and his videography that he does on his videos is just beautiful. In that it's fun, just even without the volume on. It's fun to watch his videos because they're just so pure. So yeah, Pokemon Classics, Matt. That's a great referral, Jake. He's tremendous.
No, definitely. I'll be heading over there. And
Yes.
what I tell my friends, if you're worried about Pokemon dropping all that, Logan Paul just has to drop a video and then you're good. It'll spike up again.
Yep.
Thanks, Hank.
All
Thank
right,
you.
guys. Yep. Thanks for having me. You guys have a good night.
Thank you, Hank.
Sure.
All right. So we have no one waiting right now.
Here, hold on 1 second. That's Twan. Hello? Hello? No, are you home? Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Bye. She was just checking. Whoops. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I lost your picture.
Oh, you
I
did?
can see myself.
Interesting. You should be able to see both of us.
Yeah, so one of these settings on my, and you can see me fine.
I can, but it's not very close up. It's like a close up on you now.
Oh, let me see. I must have hit something.
So what you probably hit underneath where you can see our faces, there's a bunch of different like options to press.
Right.
You want to press the third one.
The Safari thing.
Nope. So like right underneath, you should see like different layouts where you can look at us in different ways. And if you don't see that, what I would say is maybe just step back from the camera just a little bit and let's just keep going because we can still hear you and see you. Okay.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know if you're cool with that. You probably do want to see the people that come on though.
Yeah, I think it happened right when Twan called and hung up. It's like right when she hung up.
Yeah.
I lost it. So I'm looking at a big picture of myself.
Of you.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know why.
Yeah. I don't know either, honestly. It's a little bit strange.
Yeah.
So
But
right
it's
now,
okay.
so if you sit back like that, we can see you. So
Oh, okay. All right.
we can see you okay. And I guess we'll just kind of truck forward because I just don't know how to fix it on your end. And I feel like if we try to fix it, we might make it worse type of thing.
Right.
Is
Uh-huh.
that cool? Okay.
I know it's just one thing I have to click. I just don't know what it is.
I'm just not sure on your side. Like I know what it looks like on my side, but it might be different on your side.
Yeah.
I mean, we could try. So like underneath just our pictures, like the big picture of us, right?
Yeah. You can't see what can you see right now? Can you see the computer?
Nope. So you can, if you turn it around, turn the phone around, I'll see the computer. So turn
Oh,
the phone the other way, then I'll
oh,
see it.
okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, that's what I'm looking at.
So lift it up a little bit. Okay, yeah. So you put yourself in full screen. So if you have like at the top, there should be like a green, yellow, and red button. If you hit the green button,
No, I
Thrifty
don't
thinks maybe
see.
you should just go out and come back in. I'm a little concerned that might be difficult.
It might disconnect us or something. It's
Yeah.
none of these things down below or on the side, is it?
No, I think we should just keep going. I think we're just gonna trek ahead because we can see you and hear you fine.
Okay.
So for our viewers, it'll be a fine experience. I'll just have to tell you when someone's on the stream and everything like that. Okay.
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 Now there's a green thing here that says new FaceTime. Should I hit that? No?
I would not hit anything.
Okay. All right.
So we have no one waiting right now. If someone
Uh-huh.
wants to jump in, I'll put the link again.
Okay.
But otherwise, there's lots of people asking questions in the chat and
Sure.
who like aren't able to come on the screen for a variety of reasons, and they're asking me like, can we ask Gary a question here? So
Good.
why don't we do that for a little bit? If people have questions, start putting them in chat, and we'll just kind of go now for it's still pretty early here. I'm down to go for a little bit. It sounds like when Tuan comes home, maybe you'll need to kind of go then. So you'll just let me know, and we'll kind of go till then at least. Does that sound good?
That's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, because I know Peak, did you wanted to ask a question? There were a number of things. Okay, let me go back and see what did people ask. I know people are also asking some like joking questions that a lot of our like normal watchers are always like, trolling in a nice way, trolling. They're not saying anything mean, but they're always inside joke stuff that like makes it hard for me to find the real questions.
Like they're saying, who is that with you, Jake? Is that Brad Pitt?
Yeah. That type of thing.
Not quite.
Let's see. Okay, here's a question from Peak to Chew.
Mhm.
Question, Gary, do you regret taking 75,000 in cash for a portion of your Zard collection? Has there ever been a card that you haven't had a chance to buy that you've wanted? So two-part question.
Yeah, well, the first part, I'll forget the second part by the time I answer the first, so you can repeat that.
Read it.
The first part, I don't regret it because this was and is a tremendous friend of mine, and again, I'm going to die with my cards, and so by making that one deal, it's just like, do I regret selling one card to Steve Aoki or Logan Paul? I don't mind at all. I don't mind at all because it helps the hobby. Both of those two situations, really helped the hobby, and because it brought a lot. These guys have 20 million followers and that, so it brought attention to the hobby. And I wasn't gonna. I would just still have them. So, no, I'm trying to think if I have any regrets at all. And honestly, Jake and Peak the Chew, I can't think of anything that I regret what I've done. So does that answer that first part?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second part is just, was there ever a card that you haven't had a chance to buy that you've wanted? Is there a card that you wanted that just never came up?
Well, let me answer that in two ways.
Mm-hmm.
First off, there is a card that I've owned twice that I no longer own, and I wish I had that card back. and that's what I called back then the Cigar Hitmonlee. Now I called it that because I thought it was part of a cigar wrapper on the card that became embedded in the card, but it wasn't. It was actually part of the hollow sheet. So I wish I had that card back, even though I've owned it twice.
Okay.
Now, is there any other card?
Has there been any card that you never owned?
Yes.
No.
Well, I've never owned although I actually did own that for a very short period of time. There's one card I've never owned, and that's the pre-release Raichu.
Okay.
And I kind of, I always, I'm a little facetious, but I kind of joke about that card. And I tell people that there's no such thing. It doesn't exist. And the reason I say that is because I want to flush one out, where maybe I'll get to own one someday. So
maybe I should bring David Person on, and you guys could have a conversation.
David and I have talked about it. Yeah. We've talked about it. But I still don't. I think his is fake. So
I didn't know that you thought his was fake. That I didn't know.
Oh yeah. Oh no. There's no such thing. The card never existed.
Yeah.
Until one pops up that I can buy, then I'll admit they existed.
Gotcha. Wink. Gotcha. Let's see. So this isn't really a question, but I think I'm going to pose it as a question rather than just the statement. But so Falcons Gaming says, so should Pokemon, or P says Pokemon shouldn't be looked at as an investment. Do you agree, disagree? How do you feel about this topic? I'm interested in sort of your perspective on this idea.
Well, I'll tell you what, if people, didn't buy and sell them, it'd be awfully hard to get them for us who are collectors and those of us who enjoy them. I mean, if there were no collector caches and no more, no PWCCs or any of these, it'd be hard for us to find these cards. You got to have somebody who wants to sell in order to buy. So if there were no collectors, there wouldn't be any sellers. And as far as players are concerned, that's a very limited market in Pokemon. The collector market is huge compared to the players market in Pokemon. So, I mean, I'm obviously a collector, but I love the sellers. I love the people that buy and sell them as an investment, that are, just trying to make a living, because that makes it possible for the rest of us, to purchase them. Well, what do you think about that, Jay?
So I think that in my mind went to something like this, that I think you have, someone could say, right, that in maybe like for Falcons Gaming, I don't know if this would be true for you, but maybe in like the perfect world for someone like you, for example, that we'd get rid of all the middlemen, all the flippers, all the investors, and you would just have like Pokemon Company sell directly to consumer, or you'd have Pokemon Company with one middleman then selling to consumer, or Pokemon, they give it directly to Walmart, and and that they make it as cheap as possible so that the fewest possible hands touch it, which raises the price each way, because obviously like everyone wants to like make a cut, and if you got rid of all those cuts, then the product would get cheaper, at the end of the day. Now, the reason the business is the way it is, and the amount of, and the people who are involved, listen, there's probably fat in the business. There are probably people taking money who aren't providing much of a service. There are lots of other people who are providing a great service and are only able to get really low product prices because they buy so much from the Pokemon, and they have relationships with Pokemon, and Pokemon trust them, so they give them good prices, and then they actually pass along pretty good prices to you. And yes, they're going to make money. So, but I wouldn't say any of that is necessarily like investors. I think that's more of, businesses, flippers, flipping product, resellers, however you want to put it. I think for investing, this person and others might think that I've heard a few arguments. One, like it's just stupid to invest in like children's cardboard. They're sort of like the there's like the, you know, it's dumb to invest in anything that isn't the stock market or real estate. And if you use the word investing, that's like offensive to me. And like, I get where that person's coming from. And I think that there's a kernel of truth in that, of like, you have to be careful when you talk about investing in the Pokemon market, that you're not investing all of your money, and you're in more traditional assets that have intrinsic value, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm definitely not on the train of that. It's like that you can't use the word investing. I'm not on that train. That feels a little bit like intense. And like, you can invest in Pokemon or speculate in Pokemon in a more fun, enjoyable way. Now, I think most collectors, they like it when their cards go up in value. You're an investor, right? That is an investing. You want to buy something and you enjoy buying something and you enjoy seeing it going up in value. Now, for Falcons Gaming and
sure.
And now for Falcons Gaming and for other people here, like, there's also plenty of cards, and I would say everything that I buy, if it didn't go up in value, I would still enjoy it because I'm collecting the items so I'm doing both. I'm fundamentally collecting and just completing things and enjoying the art and looking at the cards and experiencing them, but I'm also enjoying the process of trying to guess what the market is going to do and see what's going to happen. And I enjoy when prices go up, and then I enjoy selling so that I can put that money into like more expensive cards. I enjoy all of that. And so I guess I think that you know, with this person saying Pokemon shouldn't be looked at as an investment, it really depends on what you mean by that, whether or not I would agree with it. But a very strong sort of like investing is bad, and using the word investing and like any sort of like market talk is bad for the hobby. Definitely not on board with that. I think that's a bit extreme, and I think as a reaction to an understandable reaction, though, to some of the nonsense and some of the negativity that has come with all of the market talk, including market talk on this channel. That's like what I would say about it. I don't know. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, that all makes sense to me. I kind of don't find fault in I don't even find fault in flippers. I mean, I just know that when something is popular, people are going to want to get it to sell. People are going to want to get it to collect, to hang on to. I think whatever happens, happens. Kind of a live and let live attitude towards that. Especially when you cannot change anything. You know, you can't change. If I say I don't like, collectors, does that mean I'm going to be able to eliminate collectors, or, you know, what effect what is it going to do? What's it going to mean? What effect am I going to have on that anyway? I'd rather just live and let live, let people enjoy things the way they want to. And certainly I do. I mean, 90% of the things I collect have zero value. I just enjoy doing it. I've always been a completionist. I just like completing sets. And it's a lot easier now than it was through most of my lifetime, when there was no internet and it was hard to find these things you wanted to complete, you know, to find cards that you wanted to complete things. You had to go to shows and in that. So, you know, I just don't begrudge anybody for dealing with their life interests in the way they do. You know, it's all okay with me.
Yeah, I think I'm very much with what you said there. I think just as a lifestyle choice, like, it reminds me of like the Serenity Prayer, and I'm going to butcher it right now, but it's something like, you know,
God give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Exactly. And that really, to me, gets at your point. And I would just add that I do think like some things are worth calling out or worth being able to change, and you can do your small part in that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think having the wisdom to know the difference is the key part there. And that's kind of what Gary's getting at, is like, there's a lot of things online. People are just yelling and creating toxicity into the void. Like, let's be completely honest. It's just toxicity into the void. You know, there's other things that are really helpful conversations that are maybe critical in nature of something, but that have a point, and there's like productivity happening around it, I think. And So that's what I would say about that. But yeah, generally speaking, when something is not like, the other thing I'll add is like, even the things that feel like very serious in Pokemon sometimes, like they're very serious because we care a lot about the space and we care about Pokemon a lot. But like
Mhm.
it's also like like it's one hobby, it's one niche thing that we all do in our lives, even if it is a very big part of your life. And I do think that, it's important not to don't let this hobby get you down, or people in it, or the negativity, or people having different views than you, ruin the hobby for you. And I think that's sort of what Gary's saying it, with the live and let live. Really,
Yes.
really, really try to enjoying yourself and why you're doing it when that happens too much.
Right.
All right. Let's see. I'm sure we have a lot more questions now. Chevels is just trolling. Question I
Chevo?
think is going to be a legit question, and it's hilarious. It's a hilarious question. Again, not mean at all. They're funny, but like they're just like nonsense questions. He's trying to get me to read one of them. All right, let's see.
Is that the CHEVO?
CHEVALS.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's see. Jordan asks, Gary, what do you think the odds that there will be another BGS 10 Charizard? Okay, that's the first question. Then there's a second question, but I'll have you answer that one first.
Okay. I don't think it's very likely, to tell you the truth, but then I thought that after the first one that there wouldn't be a second one. And then there were two, and I was lucky enough to get that second one also. But then there was a third one that, in my opinion, may not be the strongest one. In fact, it's definitely not as strong as my two. And you, like, I know that card very well. I don't think there's going to be another Beckett 10 that deserves it.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Yeah, I don't. Not only is that question, directed at you, which it should be, I don't feel like I know, like, or have the insight. I mean, it's sort of like, how much first edition base product do we think will actually be opened going forward? How much is left? What do you think the odds, if you had to put it, Gary, what are the odds of pulling one fresh out of pack? What would you put it at? I mean, you probably can't, you have no idea, but like, what do you think, having opened a bunch?
Meaning if I had a box, what would be the odds?
What are the odds that a Charizard would be BGS 10 condition fresh out of a box?
Yeah. And that I don't think. I pulled one
5%, 1%. What do you like crazy low? Like, what do you think, in terms of it being that quality that it has a chance?
I don't think there's much of a chance. Maybe 2-3%.
Okay.
Because I know, right? No, and it'd be less than that. Maybe 1%. Okay. Because there's like 122 PSA 10s, and there's 3 Beckett 10s. Right? Now, he was asking about Beckett's, right?
Yeah, BGS 10s.
Yeah, so there's 3 Beckett's and there's 122 PSAs. Yet when you open up a box, there's no guarantee it's a PSA 10 either. Okay, I would say 0.5% if I had to put a number on it.
Okay. All right, second part of the question. What do you think current alt arts will do in the future? I'm not sure if they're asking like price-wise, like what it will move, or like what Pokemon will they use. I'm not sure exactly. You can take it any way you want.
Yeah, well, I would. I mean, I'll take it. What will they do as far as popularity? I think they're just going to increase in popularity. I mean, they're pretty awesome looking. I didn't feel this way a number of years ago, because like if you're 10 feet away from me and you showed me one of full art or something, I couldn't even make out what the card was. Unlike if you turned a base set Charizard, right?
Mhm.
But I've kind of, changed a bit over the years. I mean, they're absolutely amazing looking, and people love them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the prospects as far as popularity are real good.
Yeah.
Things progress, things change, and it's not fair to bring all your old ideas, all me being older, bringing all my old ideas, into what's pertinent current day. You pretty much got to change with the times, and I felt differently when they first started coming out. I feel differently now. I've changed with the times. I think they're cool, and I think the prospects for them are very good.
And I guess as a follow-up, I'll go into the next question. Infinite War asks, do you think the Umbreon VMAX Altart is the next Zard?
Well, I think it's very, very possible. That's a monster. I don't think you'll. I don't think you can. It's hard to compare things to to Charizard. But if you had to pick something that's a close second, that would have to be right up there.
Andrew asks, Gary, does your friend still own a percentage of your collection? And if so, have you considered buying the percentage back or selling more of a percentage of the collection?
Yeah, because he's he is a bit known. I probably shouldn't say exactly. There have been some changes, since that day, number of years ago. But I don't think it's fair if I say exactly what those changes are without his okay.
Sure, I think that
You
sounds fair.
know what I mean? But I will tell him that that things are different now than they were.
Okay. Rock Pokemon asks, Gary, how has your opinion on Japanese Pokemon changed over the past 25 years?
Changed.
On Japanese Pokemon specifically.
Yeah.
And maybe has it changed? If it, has it changed, and if so, how?
Because what I'm doing is I'm trying to put my. You see, I loved the Japanese cards back in 1998. It was one of the reasons I played a part in bringing them over here, for our home shopping network. I loved them back then, and I especially loved the Koro magazine set cards. That number one Pikachu has always been one of the Ivy Pikachu has always been one of my favorites. Those glossy Koro cards are tremendous. So I've loved them from back then. I stuck pretty much with the English sets from 1999 on, though, when they got released over here. And so I've had maybe only 10%, no, maybe only 5% of my collection are the Japanese cards. It's kind of like with Scott. Scott, the majority of his collection are Japanese cards, but he has some English cards too. I'm the same way. I concentrate on English cards. If we're talking graded cards, I would say 100% English, because the Japanese cards are so easy to grade. The card stock and that, it's so easy to get 10s that I graded very, very few of my Japanese cards. Now, how has it changed to today? I don't really have much modern Japanese cards. I have a few here and there, and that's it. So
do you think highlighting the English cards, do you like, over the years, maybe more than the Japanese cards, and talking and showing the English cards more, do you think that has had an effect on the market where that impacted the English being more valuable than the Japanese?
I don't.
What do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think so because so much of that is nostalgia.
Yeah.
And all of our kids and a lot of the lot of our viewers here, they collected as a kid, and they didn't necessarily collect more Japanese than English. They collected the English. So I think just that I would say not. I would say it's just that the English cards are kind of where the nostalgia sits.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I would not just say it's you. I think that it's a lot of people, doing that. And I completely agree with what you said, that I think that sometimes what happens is that, so for example, there's some people who I'm close friends with who are like big Japanese collectors who don't understand how English is more than Japanese, because Japanese is the first language, because they prefer the look of the Japanese, because Japanese is better cardstock, right? These types of arguments.
Mm-hmm.
And you made what I think is the best argument, which is the key one, which is those were the cards that people grew up with, and they can read them.
Right.
They know English and they can read the cards, and it's the most accessible. It's the lowest hanging fruit, if we want to put it that way. It's now, as time goes on in the hobby, and people become a little bit more engaged and experienced, and when you're brand new or fairly new, I think reading the card means a lot more. But when you know that card, if someone like me or you or like anyone who's been doing this for a long time, we could show you any card. I could, any card from any WotC set, and I would know the exact set and the exact Pokemon. Like the majority of people would not be able to do all of the newer collectors. The majority of newer collectors really may not be able to do that. So I think one thing that'll be interesting to see, and maybe we're seeing it now, there's also currency, things that could be impacting the Japanese English market. Like there's all sorts of things that are potentially impacting why some Japanese cards have really gone up in value recently or are holding a little bit better. Also like the waifus and things like that can also just be part of like the culture, part of like what people value or buy over there versus here as well.
Right.
But I don't know. There's a lot of moving pieces in that, but I do think I think the narrative or the idea that the longer people are in the hobby, the more engaged they are, the more likely they are to move beyond whatever they start with, seems to make sense. And I think that is both moving beyond like base set Jungle Fossil into the other English WotC sets and into E-Series and original Nintendo X-Era, for example, and also moving into like Japanese stuff or pre-TCG, Topsoon, Cardass, Bandai, and then move into things like vending series and Misaki promos, and then into like play promos and, from the various years, like I think, and Versa series, like these beautiful, discovering those sorts of things. And then developing that love for Japanese and then it continuing. It will be interesting to see though, like if new people coming into the game begin starting with Japanese more. And I do think if there are more influencers, and this might be the piece, because you're certainly an influencer, and I mean that in a very positive way. You're a big, hero of the hobby. And so of course your opinions and you're going to have influence. But I think that the people who have a voice and are on camera talking, the fact that there are more people talking about the Japanese cards in the Japanese market will make it more likely that people who are newer will go quicker into Japanese than they would have. And I think even I think Twice Big Jake had a decent impact. Him having a really large channel, probably the largest financial channel of any YouTuber, in the Pokemon space, and talking about like those niche promos like from Japan and putting a lot. Now, obviously Scott has been talking about them for years and Scott puts a lot of awareness and attention on that, but not to the level or the degree that Jake was able to, with the amount of, Jake gets 30,000, some of his videos have 400,000 views, the amount of attention and reach of that for the first time on those types of cards. Because really, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but I mean, the majority of like Leonhardt's content and Unlisted Leaf's content was opening English and was opening, because that was what people wanted. It's that chicken or the egg thing, to go to your point. It's like, are they making people want that more, or is it just that people want that and so that's what they're giving them? You know what I mean? And probably some of both.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
Any
you know what? I kind of agree with that. I kind of agree with that. That I do think. Guess who got home?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Very cute.
Yeah.
I have 5 birds.
See, she's counting those parakeets. Yeah, but yeah, I do agree with that. If there were more Scots out there producing content, there'd be a lot more interest in Japanese. And I agree with you also that once you collect all the English Charizards, what's the next natural thing?
Yeah.
Is to start collecting the Japanese Charizards. So,
Yep.
Mama, no, open. Here, tell mommy, come here. Let her say hi to Jake. Mama, come here a second. Say hi to Jake. You can't see him because I don't know why, but
Hi. Let me see why.
that's you talked in Texas.
I'm just a voice. We're on a stream right now talking to some of my YouTube followers on the Pokenomics channel. I met you in Denver briefly. I'm not sure if you remember, but it was nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you again. I don't know why he doesn't show your face here.
Can you fix it? We weren't sure exactly how to fix it on his end, and we didn't want to mess it up because we're sort of live talking.
Oh.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna try one thing, but if it disconnects us, you're thinking that too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit this thing or even
Okay.
this up here.
No.
If it disconnects us, that's okay. I know you have to run anyway very soon.
Yeah, I do.
So
I do.
That's
So,
okay.
it's been a real pleasure, Jake, and thanks to everybody for joining in with us.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time, Gary, and
Sure.
I think I'm glad a few people at least were able to jump in and get to meet you and talk to you this way.
Yeah, well,
So-
we'll do it again soon for sure.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay,
All right.
I'm gonna hit this button and see if anything blows up.
All right. Let's see what happens.
What is this? No, that's not it. New FaceTime. What would you click? No. No. Okay. Over here.
See. No, not there.
Oh, got it. Can you
Got
hear
it?
me? Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I did?
Yeah.
You remember, Jake?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I did was I hit the Google Chrome icon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that brought up both of us.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
Well, good. So thank you again.
thank you, Jake.
Really
All right.
appreciate it, and we'll be in touch. And I think a bunch of us are going to come to Orlando, so hopefully we'll see you for that one.
God willing, health willing, I'll be at every single one. So for sure.
Okay, maybe we'll try to do a live, like in person one time at one of these things.
Let's
I know,
do
Oh,
that.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
I know we've talked about that before.
Good.
Maybe we'll try it.
Okay,
All right.
deal. All right, you take care.
Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
All right. So was great hanging out with Gary and having him on. I'm happy to go for like another 15 minutes, and then I'm actually going to go and have some dinner and wrestle a little bit. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that. But if there are any like burning questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I'll give it, a couple of minutes here. But yeah, but otherwise I am actually going to hold myself to 15 minutes. A real 15 minutes, not a Pokenomics stream 15 minutes that ends up being an hour. Oh, Shovels. Dude, your comments today are too much. I can't even show that one. Between the Ropes asked Jake, can you please give your thoughts on the Target reviews for Charizard UPC? Seems like many are resealed or tampered. I'm sorry, I can't. Between the Ropes, I haven't heard that. Wow. You want to fill me in the chat, or I don't know if people have been hearing that. That's crazy. That sounds bad. It would be my thought. I don't know. Yikes. That's crazy if that's true. I don't know why that would be or what the story is there. So I can't comment. Damn. Maria says, someone quick asking about Moonbreon on the Charizard UPC. I've never answered questions about that before. I think we need a chart to a graph how many times I'm asked questions about certain items. And that is probably going to be not the time to buy those items, like overall on average. Like all of those times that I was asked, although interestingly, like, because I remember, like, I used to get asked constant questions about like Hidden Fates when Hidden Fates was at its high. I used to get constant questions about Evolutions when it was at its high, but I also got a lot of questions about Evolutions when it was like $300 to $400, and then it still went to $1,000. Just like I was asked lots of questions about Moonbreon when it was $600, $700, and then went to $1,200. Noticing a pattern there, a doubling pattern, but those are just two, obviously. I don't think that is necessarily going to be a repeatable pattern, but it is funny. So Infinite War says there are a ton of fake reviews on Target's website. People who don't know enough about the product and think they got scammed, or just are upset with their polls. So people just complaining about the product, but it not actually being fake. Interesting. Oh, interesting. And Between the Ropes following up with the distribution of reviews, like half are 5-star and half are 1-star. Odd. I was not aware of that. Kondo says, Jake, have you seen Rudy's new huge opportunity in Pokemon video? He's getting bullish. I did catch part of a video recently. I'm not sure it was titled that, where Rudy was talking about Pokemon, and he's been saying this for a while, and it's quite a bit the same type of stuff. But yeah, he's basically just commenting on, in the video, he's just sort of commenting on how surprising, I think, from his perspective, even as someone who was fairly bullish, a lot of the prices are on Pokemon. And now Rudy has been saying do not buy any Pokemon singles, modern Pokemon singles, including alt arts or anything, for a while. Now he's not super engaged in the market where he's going to be, and Rudy just buys like sealed product, and then, like, to my knowledge, it's sealed product and like vintage Magic, and then like I think he's buying like Flesh and Blood, like big cards and Flesh and Blood, I think he buys too. But other than that, I'm pretty sure he just has sealed product. So like that's not his game or his world anyway. But it is interesting. But what he has been saying is, like, he made big bets, we could say. I mean, he buys every product. So like part of the thing about Rudy, or like someone who buys every single thing from all sorts of things, is like not only does he make money constantly by just selling to his patrons, so even like things like Force of Will and like some Way Schwartz boxes and things that like have not done well, like he still did pretty well on them, or at least like probably broke even. Or Magic, like standard boxes and draft boxes that have like done really poorly, and if you had like invested in any of those, you would have lost quite a bit of money. Probably the price that he's getting at, and then the fact that he can like sell it to his patrons who are also paying him like $15 a month. I'm sure the business is really good for him. So he's in a very different position than most people who are like buying 2 of these boxes off of eBay and like paying all of the fees and having to deal with that. So prefacing it with all of that, Pokemon, the modern booster boxes, you cannot deny that the movement and that the price holding, even on the slightly lesser sets, has been incredibly impressive, has been very strong and encouraging, particularly when you compare it to the Magic market, which I think is part of where he's coming from, or other markets that he's in. It's very interesting that Pokemon is outperforming the other ones. Now, when everything is doing really well and everything across the board is doing well, you can say, well, that's because we're in a boom for cards or something like that. But when just Pokemon is doing well, but other card games are not doing well, that's very interesting. And it shows one of two things, or both, maybe both of these two things. One, that obviously Pokemon is just a lot more popular and a lot more people in it. But that actually doesn't matter alone, because that's just a demand thing. The supply side also matters. And up to this point, they're not printing enough, or they're printing the amount they're printing is not crashing those markets to the point where boxes are super low. And as long as they continue to do that, and whether that's because, and he talked in the video, I think, a lot about, a few different things that we've talked about on this channel a bunch, that lots of channels talk about a bunch, right? That, what's going on here? Is it investors selling to investors? Is it speculators, or is it collectors, pushing all this market up? And if it's collectors pushing all this market up, and it's not just like hoarders holding a lot of sealed product, it may very well just be that the Pokemon market's a lot larger now. There are tons of collectors, and that even 9xing the supply isn't enough to push these prices down below that $80-$70 price point, or even lower. And in fact, in things like Evolving Skies and Brilliant Stars, we're talking like $140 to $180 and $240. I mean, it's remarkable. I would not say it's as remarkable as Evolution's going to $1,000. To me, that was even more remarkable, just given the amount of supply and the fact that it's very, like, for a box to go from $100 to $1,000 in like a few months is like even more amazing, with just the amount of total supply of that. But it's still like very impressive that a set. Now, Evolutions gets hyped up too much because there's a lot of sets, like including Team Up, and like, those were some of the outliers, but like tons of sets from Sun and Moon and X and Y moved at the same percentage, or reasonably close to the same percentage as Evolutions went up. So I don't do a good enough job of saying that, and I talk too much, and I used to talk just too much about Evolutions movement and not about the other ones. So it was a little bit like everything was doing that. Part of it was like the crazy boom period. But the fact that like we're not in a boom period right now relative to where we were, and in fact there's a little bit of like negativity and retracing overall in the last 12 months, slight retracing, we could say, after the big fall. The fact that booster boxes within that time frame are able to go from $90 to $240, any booster box, even that, and like of a main set that is not like a niche like product that wasn't mass produced, like that's just impressive. Like you guys have to be like, wow, like Pokemon's on fire. For now. Now, what happens, like, again, the higher the price goes, like I didn't think that was a great buy at 140 to 180. I made videos on it, and I thought that it was okay. I suggested that maybe you pick up one or two or something if you really want the set within that range. I waited for the second reprint, trying to get them as low as possible. I happened to get lucky. There was a pretty big second reprint, and they happened to fall to 95. If prices had not fallen to 95, I would have missed out. Like if prices had fallen to like 110, I probably would have bought a few, but not nearly as many. And that was the luck that it fell that low, that I then was able to buy it at a really low price point, because I had no idea it would go to 240 or 260. I thought it would go maybe back up to like 180 or 160. There was like a decent chance of that. And at 90, I felt comfortable taking that risk, right? Anyway, all that being said, do I think there's a huge opportunity in buying Evolving Skies right now? I have no freaking idea, is the honest answer. It's crazy. I don't see the value. I think it's just gambling and high risk, but that doesn't mean that like won't happen necessarily. I think it's more likely to probably stay where it is, or maybe just trend within a range, than it is to like double or go up hugely again, particularly as we see like the Moonbreon come down from 1,500, maybe down to 1,200. Maybe it's going to keep falling. I've been seeing like there are times when there were like 10 Moonbreon auctions for PSA 10s going at once, and just consistently for days and days and days and days. That's a lot of that card selling for over $1,000. Like how much can the market take of that? It feels like a lot. So is there huge opportunity in Pokemon in modern sealed product? I would say, all the talk about like the Charizard UPC being like a definite no miss, like all these types of things, like I would not go that strong because Pokemon can reprint things, because if you keep things sealed, we're just talking about sealed. We're not talking about opening up the product and grading the hits and then making money on like the promos for the UPC, which was a big part of why people are so bullish on that play, to be fair. But just like keeping the sealed product and like putting it back as like an investment or doing that for any box. Like, do I think it's like 100% guaranteed? No. But I think like the fact that it's still working in this environment to this extent, and the fact that Pokemon, even though they printed seemingly quite a bit, it's still doing that. And if you continue to see that set after set after set, if you can buy after a big reprint, you know, at like 90 to 95 or even like 80 to 85, if you can get lucky, of like a good, strong set, right, in this environment, it's logical to do that with the knowledge that like it could stop working at any time. Like that would be my mindset. This could stop working at any time, but like it continues to work right now. And the buffer is so huge. Because even if that box just goes to 140 instead of 240, that's still like huge growth in a really short amount of time. I mean, it's kind of wild. So I don't know. Andrew Election says, Jake, have you, and then I think this will be the last question. And then I will head off for the night. Andrew asked Jake, have you considered having reserved investments back for another live discussion? Huge fan of both of y'all's perspectives in the hobby. I would have Sean on again. I wish Sean had deeper knowledge of Pokemon specifically to talk specifics within the hobby, but I think Sean and I can have not real like conversations at least I enjoy around just like broader concepts around these hobbies. So I would certainly like consider having him on again or invite him on, or maybe I could bring him on at like a panel where we talk with a few different people for more of a conversation on sort of where are cards or where's pop culture stuff going in general rather than Pokemon specifically, is what I would say. But definitely his perspective and channel was like, particularly like early on in the Mania, was like a huge, it was great to see that someone was coming out in that type of environment and saying the types of things. Like I felt like I wasn't alone, or as alone maybe. So I definitely appreciate that. I do think that like, for me, Sean beats the sort of like danger drum a little bit too strong, but maybe he wouldn't in a conversation with me because he would feel like I maybe understand the risks a little more. And maybe he feels like he's talking to people constantly who like are so bullish and think like all of this stuff can't fail and are truly like investing their life savings in this. I don't really know exactly where he's coming from. But the idea that like, I do believe that, so one thing Sean has talked about, which I don't necessarily agree with, or I don't think we know yet, maybe is the best way to put it, is that I forget the guy he talks a lot about, Harry something. He's like a old timer, and I've watched some interviews of him and read a little bit of his stuff. And his perspective, this guy Harry something, I can't remember his last name, is very much on the train of like pop culture collectibles are not good investments. They're cyclical. They're not linear, which I agree with to some extent. And that they have a short life and then they die, and they tend to be more of like they burn out. They tend to more and then they hurt people, and they're more like a fad rather than like an established market that can be something for a long period of time. Okay, I think that Harry underestimates, in my view, or doesn't understand that pop culture for our generation is different than pop culture for previous generations, because of video games, because of the quality of movie, and because of the online social media landscape. And I'm not saying that the IPs today are necessarily better than the IPs back then, but the production value and the entertainment of the IPs is so much better and more intense and engrossing than it was back then, I would argue. That I think it, like, these IPs are able to compete and develop their stories in such gorgeous, complex ways that it's much more engaged and entrenched in our lives. And so I would argue that things like Pokemon and the size of these companies and the amount of money keeping these IPs alive and keeping these going. And you see like Disney with Lorcana, you see Disney with like Marvel and Star Wars, like these juggernauts did not exist They like these huge, like it used to just be like a couple of like television stations with like a couple of, and yes, there were some huge hits over the years and some big TV shows and but I don't think there was anything to this scale. And so the lasting power of these IPs, because of where they're at and because of social media and all of this stuff, I think could be like 50 years longer, or 100 years longer, or like who the hell knows, right? Like it's all random speculation. Could even just be like 10, 20 years longer, which will be a lot longer than like your collectible categories, your pop culture collectible categories, like in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. That's my sort of theory or thesis that I've been basing a lot of my ideas on. And I think cards themselves could become and are becoming more of an established collectible thing. And when you combine that, which is like the collectible that we're collecting category, with the IPs, all these strong IPs that are using this like medium, I think that is what's happening. And that combination of things could surprise and continue to surprise people for a long time. And I think with sports, you've already seen it for a number of generations. And I think you could see it. Now, could all this be wrong and it all dies out in 5, 10, 15 years? For sure. And that's why I'm 7 out of 10 confident on it, or like, 6, 7, 8. And at the end of the day, I have the luxury, because I'm not actually investing in this to support my life, that I don't need to be sure. And it can just be fun to enjoy it. And and part of what we were talking about earlier today, with Gary, it doesn't need to continue to grow. And I don't need those things to be true in order to really enjoy being in this hobby. Right now, to Pokemon Hollow's question earlier before, which is a great question of like, should I sell more to prepare for a downturn because then I won't feel as bad? I think that's really very reasonable. And I think that's always a reasonable thing to be doing. You want to be able to afford your collection. And if Pokemon were to, 50, have in value again, you don't want to be holding a bunch of things you don't want. And those are just very personal, things that people have to decide for themselves. But that's not what I think will happen. That's not what I expect to happen at this point. But that's what I would say. Oh, thanks. Rock Pokemon said Harry Rinker. Yeah, that was his name, Harry Rinker. And I agree with Harry Rinker on some things, but I also think people sometimes, and this can really go both ways. I think young people like me, I still consider myself fairly young in terms of like maturity and life experience, right? We could certainly overvalue, like we cannot listen to our elders, and we can overvalue our own opinions. We have not been on this planet as long. We haven't experienced as much. We potentially aren't that wise. We maybe have more to prove. So we have bigger egos. So we're going to make more mistakes. I think that there's psychologically things to say about all of that. I also think that I've run into older people who have a hard time adapting. They become more conservative and fearful and more tied to like comfort, and they need to be like the expert and understand how things are, instead of acknowledging or realizing that maybe things can change and that they actually like need to change with it or continue to change with it, and they maybe don't know as much as they think they do. And I've like, as a therapist working with young people and old people and the whole range, I've seen both of those dynamics happen. And so with some of Harry Rinker's stuff and some of the stuff that I hear, it's like, I don't think Harry Rinker understands social media. I know he doesn't. I know that he doesn't understand internet online culture. And I don't think he understands the size of these IPs or the strengths of these IPs. Now, I do think he understands collectible markets and pop culture collectible stuff without that stuff much better than I do, or much better than people who've only been doing it for 7, 8, 10 years, right? And so it's very important to listen to people like that and try to combine what they're saying, in my view, with some of the stuff that that they don't know, which is like in-depth knowledge of sort of like the current landscape that they may not have. Okay, so I'll leave you guys with that. As always, really appreciate everyone. If you're interested in supporting the channel and engaging in more of this type of content, please consider joining my Patreon. We have a private Discord for that, with 300 people, lots of market discussions, lots of great people in there. And we have once a month we do a sort of deep dive live Zoom meeting with a bunch of guys and ladies, or some ladies, as Rudy would say, some percentage of ladies and a lot of guys, talking about these concepts, and we do a sort of a deeper analysis. This month I'm going to be doing, I think it's looking like I'm probably going to be doing, it's a little early, maybe I shouldn't say, but I think I'm going to be doing a pop report analysis and update on something I did 8 months ago. And then next month we're going to be having a guest on. So we will talk more about that as it gets closer. And otherwise, just really appreciate all of you guys for, even if you're not Patreon supporters, just watching the channel and engaging in the chat, meeting a bunch of you guys in person. Any way you kind of support me or just the hobby or each other, I appreciate all of that. So thank you all so much. And I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, take care.